in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad, just put your foot down, Dad, we're in a field. Put your foot down, this rhino was chasing us."
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting his front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my out of the pen. Then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its two front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, Christ, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. This is Talk. Thank you so much for your company. I'm Peter Cardwell. Lots to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. We definitely want to hear your opinions too. Of course, my guests are very important to this programme, but you're even more important. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Should the Conservatives just ignore Nigel Farage? That's what Boris Johnson, the former Prime Minister, is advocating this morning. We'll speak to one Conservative MP in just a second about that. We'll also talk about autumn tax rises, the fact that Rachel Reeves is now looking at £30 billion of a black hole to try to deal with. We'll talk as well about her trials this week and 1 year of Labour. It was actually this day that Keir Starmer went to Buckingham Palace, became Prime Minister exactly a year ago. What are your reflections on all of that? Well, on the debate desk, we've got Paul Richards, former Labour advisor, and Matthew Goodwin-Freeman, political commentator as well. We'll talk as well about Oasis. We'll talk about Glastonbury. We'll talk about Zara Sultana setting up her new party, a possible ceasefire in Gaza as well. Also, the Home Office not knowing how many foreign workers will stay in Britain, and a national blitz on illegal workers. It's in the Sun today. This is in regard to people who deliver food for companies like Deliveroo and Uber Eats as well. We'll talk about the renters' rights. There are many organisations that say they should have the right to have an animal, to have a pet in your flat. Lots of renters saying they want that, lots of landlords saying they shouldn't have it. And we'll talk about the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, failing to express support for the Director General of the BBC after that huge controversy last weekend at Glastonbury. Loads to discuss here on Talk. I want your views as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the word Talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, send me a voice note, send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring on the main number 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, thank you so much for your company this morning. There's so many topics around. Andrew Rossendale, I'm delighted to say, the Shadow Foreign Office Minister, is with me, Conservative MP for Romford. Hi, Andrew. Great. Thanks for coming in.
Good morning, Peter. Great to be on your show again.
There's a lot around this morning. The thing that's going to affect most people is if Rachel Reeves puts up taxes in the autumn at the budget. She would say, of course, that she received such a bad economic inheritance from the Conservatives. But look, they've been in power for a year. We know that they tried to get through their welfare bill this week. Something that was meant to save £5 billion actually ended up costing £100 million a year. What's your reaction?
Labour have been in power a year. They've spent most of that time blaming the last government for all the ills of the country. They can't keep doing this. The reality is the policies they've adopted are detrimental to the growth of our economy. They haven't adopted policies that bring in the wealth and create the prosperity. They've done the exact opposite of that. They're chasing the wealth creators out of the country. They're taxing people so that it's almost not worth working because you're paying so much high taxes. And we know where that leads. It leads to a downward spiral. And this is typical of what Labour governments always do. It doesn't surprise me they've done this because they're ideologically driven. Labour are not driven by what works, they're driven by what they think their ideology tells them they should do. Conservatives have ideology too, of course, and they followed that ideology, and look where it got them. It got a historic defeat. I wish the Conservatives had a little bit more of that. Sometimes we say we believe in things but do the opposite. So we didn't leave the country with low taxes, we left them with one of the highest tax levels we've had for many decades. So I don't think the Conservatives necessarily do stick to the kind of policies that do create. We didn't do it. Let's face it, that's why we lost. Margaret Thatcher did the opposite. She stuck to a clear vision for our country, and that led to many years, decades of prosperity, and 3 to 4 Conservative election victories. And we're out of office because we lost our way. But Labour are following policies that will not provide the wealth the country needs. So Rachel Reeves has completely gone in the wrong direction from what I can see, and her behaviour this week, very sorry that she was upset, but I look at the country and see people, farmers, I see businessmen, I see people that want to get on with their lives are finding it very hard because of the government's policies that she has pursued. It's very interesting that Rachel Reeves, of course, crying this week, had a very tough week for her, but she's also told the Cabinet that the low-hanging fruit of the previous tax rise, as she called it, low-hanging fruit. I think there are a lot of people who run businesses who would say that the national insurance rise was actually something that they didn't want. But interestingly, we have this situation that I think, and maybe you disagree with this, Andrew, but I see a situation where the tail is wagging the dog in regard to the backbenchers of the Labour Party. They know they can get U-turns out of Keir Starmer. Quite a few of those have happened over the past year, and indeed the past 10 days. In terms of the opposition, it is, to me, the Labour backbenches. Reform UK, of course, has a megaphone. Where are the Tories in all of this? Because some of the latest polling putting you at 16%. So the Conservatives need to be more radical. We need to show that we believe in things and we've got a clear purpose. That's how you win elections. That's how you inspire the people to vote for you. Not radical enough, do you think? Kemi is going through a policy commission review, looking at different ideas that the party can adopt for the future. I think we need to be much faster. Being honest about this, we need to be clear about what we stand for, because for every day we are procrastinating in terms of deciding what we're going to do, more people are leaving to reform. So the Conservative Party does need to realise that the world of politics has changed. I think the sands have shifted and we need to be ahead of the curve. We need to be in tune and going with the grain of the British people. And we weren't in the last few years. That's why we're out of office. A year on of opposition as well. Are you in tune with the British people? Well, I think that we simply can't afford another 5 years of a Labour government. They are a calamity for our country. But are you saying that the Conservatives are not now currently in tune with the British people? I think we're still going through the aftermath of the last election. I think we need to snap out of that. We must forget the last government. We must think about the future of our country. And I believe our country must be put before party. And that means we have to make whatever sacrifices are needed to get this government out. It's a disaster. What they're doing is making our country, they're diminishing our country, and they're making our country poor a long way down the road. So the next generation will not have the great nation that we grew up in. It will be diminished. And the socialist ideology that this government are pursuing has to be stopped, and we need to make sure it's a one-term Labour government. So that's Kemi's job. And we have to do whatever is necessary to ensure that in 4 years' time we we have a change of government, we have a right of centre government that actually believes in this country and goes for a radical plan, like Margaret Thatcher did in '79, to put the country back on its feet and in the right direction again.
Many people would argue that that's Reform UK. Boris Johnson saying that the Tories should just ignore Farage at the moment. Do you think that's the right strategy?
No, not at all. I think that there is a broad consensus of people I speak to across the country who have now realised that going down the socialist route is not the way. So somehow we need to bring people together who have similar mind on some of these issues. And I think the right of centre in this country is currently divided. The trouble is, Peter, under our electoral system, if you have a divided right of centre, the winners will probably be the left, because even if Labour goes through a big defeat in the next election, they could be propped up by Lib Dems. You know, they could go down, they could halve the number of MPs, but the Lib Dems could prop them up, the Greens, the Plaid Cymru, the SNP. So the danger is we all want a change of government next time, but because we're squabbling about reform, about Conservative, about whatever it might be at the time, we actually hand power back to the left, and that's what I don't want to see.
Speaking of the left, we've had Jeremy Corbyn, Zara Sultana setting up this new party. What impact do you think, if any, that will have on UK politics?
Well, it's going to be very interesting, because I believe that in this country there is, with respect to them, an element of people who are socialist, proper socialists.
Well, we have 4 pro-Gaza MPs, of course, elected as well alongside Jeremy Corbyn. They're already in an independent grouping in Parliament.
They are. There's 5 of them with Jeremy. So there is a section of our society that truly believes in typical old socialist ideas. I don't agree with any of that, but I do respect people like Jeremy who have always stood up for them. The problem is the Labour Party. The people who believe in those things have always felt a little bit sidelined until Jeremy became leader, but that ended in calamity for the Labour Party. So maybe it is time for those who believe in socialism and who believe in a more left-wing approach to form their own party, just as I suppose is happening on the right at the moment. There's a split on the right, equally so there could be a split on the left. We are, it appears, going into sort of like a multi-party democracy at the moment. My fear is that because our first-past-the-post system is in place, and that's not likely to change anytime soon, it's going to be very hard to form any kind of majority government. And so that's why I strongly believe that the right of centre in British politics needs to find a way of coming together. Otherwise, the left wing would potentially take control of this country for another 5 years, and that's something none of us want to see.
What does that coming together look like, Andrew? Because many people would say that there could well be some sort of coalition or indeed electoral pact between Reform and the Conservatives. I can see what's in that for the Conservatives, languishing at 16%. What I can't see is what's in it for Reform UK, with one poll last weekend, for example, saying they would get at least a very strong minority administration, and even the poll suggested anyway, even if they took the Conservatives on, they still wouldn't have a majority.
So, look, we're 4 years away before an election. Anything could change, anything could happen. At the moment, the polls give Reform a very strong lead, a lot of support. Every poll I've seen lately shows Reform at least being the largest party, if not being the majority party. So you've got a fair point, but we are a long way until the next election. I say to both Kemi and to Nigel and to everybody that really cares about this country that when we get to that stage, we're facing an election, we need to think about what's best for the country. And what is the worst thing for the country is to see another 5 years of a left-wing Labour government, possibly propped up by even more left-wing smaller parties that will make all kinds of demands about what they want. That would be a calamity for our United Kingdom. So I believe in putting my country first. I only got into politics because I love this country and want the best for the United Kingdom, and I think we all have to do the same. So ultimately we need to somehow find a right of centre way forward. Now that could be a Conservative majority government. At the moment it doesn't look very good, does it? But could be a majority Reform government, but the way our electoral system works, I'm afraid that there's no guarantee of anything at this stage. But I think we need to focus on policy at the moment and try and find common ground on things we can believe in together and have a vision for the country, and then we can bring the people with us come the election.
Tell me about flags. If there's anything I know about coming from Northern Ireland, it's how flags can annoy people. I know you are part of a committee, you're the chairman of a committee in regard to flags, and you had a big debate in Parliament recently about this as well. There are lots of flags that fly from government buildings, there are lots of pride flags, lots of other flags, that flags of other countries as well. Sometimes people agree with that, sometimes people don't. Not too much annoyance about the Ukrainian flag, for example, sometimes flying from government buildings, although some people think that shouldn't happen as well. What's your proposal?
So I believe that public buildings, which are taxpayer funded, should only fly official flags. And I made a speech last week about this in Westminster Hall. We're seeing a multitude of flags representing all kinds of usually politically motivated groups. And I don't think that's right. I think that every public building, first and foremost, should fly the Union flag or the Union Jack. Both names are correct. That's the flag of our country, and that's primarily the flag which we should fly. Of course, the Cross of St George in England, yeah. Of course, in Northern Ireland, I know there's a dispute about, but whether it's Cross of St Patrick or the Red Hand of Ulster.
I like the Cross of St Patrick. I think that's reasonable.
I think it's reasonable. I like both, actually. Lord Emphy this week gave me a Red Hand of Ulster flag, right, which I'm very proud to have in my office. But the reality is county flags, country flags, national flags, military flags for instance, Armed Forces Day, for Battle of Britain Day, the Royal Air Force flag, and of course royal flags. But why should we fly flags of all kinds of minority groups or lobby groups or political campaigns?
What difference does it make?
Because these are public buildings and they should be neutral. If you fly the flag of one group, you fly the flag of every single group that you possibly consider deserves a flag, and anyone can say, this is our flag, when are you going to fly mine? So we now have a multitude of flags representing all kinds of things.
Do we have too many days and too many months and things that represent all sorts of different things? I mean,
well, we do, and I think it's got out of control. But nothing wrong with a day. If you want to have a day for animals, for instance, we all love animals. Let's have an animal day. Does that mean we have an animal flag flown on every town hall, every government building, every public body? Of course it does. It would be nonsense to do this. And then you've got all kinds of flags for all kinds of purposes. I think when I look at a town hall or a government building, I want to see the Union Jack. If you look at Whitehall at the moment, and I was there only yesterday, I looked along Whitehall and all I could see was a multitude of flags and barely any Union Jack. I don't think that's right. I think first and foremost, our national flag should come first.
It's interesting we mentioned the Union flag and the Union Jack. Some people say it's only the Union Jack if it's on a boat or a ship or a yacht. Tell us, you said both are correct?
Yes. Now this is a big misunderstanding.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. So I'm chairman of the Flags and Heraldry Committee.
You know your stuff.
Sort of. But the Flag Institute are the experts, and they've published a booklet about this, and they've looked at the history of this. In fact, yes, originally, of course, the Union Jack flew on a ship. But believe it or not, Peter, we've never passed any legislation, never had a royal proclamation to say that the Union Jack or the Union flag is our official flag. So officially it's just by sort of it's evolved to become our national convention. And
much
so
like the constitution of this country in many ways.
Precisely. And the only definition of what our national flag is officially was a statement by a minister quite some time ago in the House of Commons where he stated that the Union flag, Union Jack, is our national flag. Okay. So that is the only thing we're basing it on, but both terms are correct. So most people I speak to say Union Jack, and I'm quite happy to say it's the Union Jack, but if you want to say Union flag, as far as I'm concerned, it's the red, white and blue, and it represents our nation, and we should fly it all year round. And I'm glad that we're doing that on Parliament, but I think we should do it on all public buildings, and it should take precedence to any other flag.
Andrew Rossendale, MP for Rumford for the Conservatives, Shadow Foreign Office Minister. Thanks for joining us in the studio this morning. Really appreciate you coming in on a Saturday. Sean has been in touch from Bridlington and says the Conservatives stand for a lot of things and many of them are contradictory. There are too many in the parliamentary party who should be in Labour or the Lib Dems, says Sean. Leslie says, hi Peter, a new year of Starmer. What can we look forward to? The persecution of our elderly, veterans, more taxes, the left ruling Starmer. thousands of new arrivals, says Leslie. And Simon in Canterbury says, morning Cardi P, will the new political party involving Zara Sultana and Jeremy Corbyn be the Fruit and Nut Party, says Simon. I'd love a fruit and nut. And thank you to Brian, who says, have you lost weight? You can stay, Brian, you're very welcome. Anytime to make that suggestion. Can you remind your political guests, two wrongs don't make a right, and ask them how much growth do we actually need to pay back the 2.8 trillion and counting that we owe? Well, we'll get into all of that with the debate desk in just a second. We've got Matthew Goodwin Freeman is with us, as is Paul Richards, former Labour advisor. Lots to discuss. Tell us your thoughts too. 0344 499 1000.
One year on.
And it's already falling apart.
We did it! Smash the people smuggling gangs.
There is no deterrent.
More and more migrants have come to Britain.
I thought Starmer would definitely last the 4 or 5 years. Now I'm thinking 2 maximum.
And it turns out that Keir Starmer had a wardrobe busier than David Beckham's.
One explosive hour.
U-turn after U-turn.
I'm frightened about how bad they are.
Absolute incompetence and deceit.
1 year of chaos.
Only on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you everybody who has been in touch, including Janice in Staffordshire, who said, Peter, what's your thought on Macron's state visit with his agenda of getting Starmer by hook or by crook to acknowledge Palestine as a state? He'll not be happy if Starmer doesn't agree to it. Well, we will talk about that. I thought actually that might happen previously. It hasn't so far. I hope it doesn't. I want there to be a two-state solution in the Middle East. I want there to be peace there. I want the Palestinians and the Israelis to live in peace and be free of war. Of course, what I don't want is a one-state solution without Israel, and that's what Hamas want. Stephen Beckenham says, I think the Tories' biggest problem is that they have too many in the party who are too left-leaning. Unless they get rid of these, they have no chance of recovering enough to beat reform. Lots of opinions coming into the building. Keep them coming. 0344 499 1000. Let's go to the debate desk. Paul Richards is with us. He's a former Labour Special Advisor, and Matthew Goodwin Freeman, political commentator and Conservative Conservative councillor, I should say, as well. You're both very, very welcome to the debate desk.
Thank you.
And congratulations to Matthew, who has a new book out at the moment. It is called A Blueprint, How We Bucked the Trend and Beat the 1% Exit Poll of the 2024 general election. How is it going?
Really good. We had the launch yesterday. Loads of people tuned in, and today interviews, and just giving out copies as much as I can, basically.
Brilliant.
Really
and
happy.
You can get them on Amazon, you can get them from your website.
Yeah, my website, matthewgoodmanfreeman.uk/book.
It's endorsed by no less than Bob Blackman, so there we are, a great man. Lots to discuss there, and in fact, very sad news that we're going to start with, which is that Diogo Jota's funeral is happening at the moment. The Liverpool striker, I think we can see perhaps a little bit of the footage if you're watching on the screen. There are people standing at the door. Of course, there are many people in how do you pronounce it? Genodomar, where it is. It is happening there. Of course, there are many Liverpool players there. Just a brief reflection, Matthew. I know you're a football fan.
I mean, for me, this is just so tragic. A genuine, brilliant star. And what's heartbreaking about this is how soon after his wedding it was. I think he literally got married 12 days ago.
Yeah, it was 12 days. Yeah,
so,
11, 12 days.
You know, I got married last year. I cannot imagine losing the love of your life, who he's got 3 kids with as well. They're losing a dad just 12 days after the happiest day of their life. It's genuinely so sad.
Paul, a very sad day for football and for the country.
My son is a Liverpool fan and he is absolutely distraught, but I think the tragedy goes beyond just Liverpool fans. I think all football fans and just any decent person just takes the tragedy from this. It is so sad.
We'll be talking to Will Hobbs a little bit later on about that. It's a big weekend of sport as well. There's so much that is happening, everything from the Tour de France to so many football matches. Tennis, of course, Emma Raducanu out of Wimbledon now. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But let's move to political issues with Matthew and with Paul. It's 1 year on from the Labour government. Yesterday was the anniversary of the election. Today's the anniversary of the actual day where Keir Starmer went to Buckingham Palace, got the seals of office, formally became Prime Minister. Paul, has it been a good year, a bad year, a mixed year? What are your highlights and lowlights?
Well, good in parts, I would say. And I think, you know, in the sweep of history, no government should be judged after 1 year. And I think there's a number of useful things, foundations laid, things like the 10-year plan in the NHS, the industrial strategy, the rearmament plan, the trade deals with the EU and India and crucially with the US, which lay the foundations for success in the future. Labour did inherit a mess and after a year managed to fill in some of those potholes, metaphorically and also literally, but it is early days, and as we'll discuss, I'm sure there have been missteps too and mistakes, as all governments make.
What do you think? Name me the best thing they've done and the worst thing they've done.
I think the best thing is recognising that we have to rearm and putting all of that extra money into defence.
Well, the money has to come from somewhere, doesn't it?
Well, it's come from the overseas development budget, so it's a straight
swap. But if you get up to 5%, there's going to be a lot more taxation.
Yeah, and I think we'll look back and think 5% seems small, actually.
Really?
Given the level of the threat and where we are in the world with the geopolitics. So I think that's going to be the animating purpose of this government. Worst, some of the U-turns, I guess. I mean, the shambles this week, I think creates a lasting impression in the mind of the voter that somehow things are a little bit out of control and not as coordinated and led as they should be. And, just being honest, I think that has left a bad taste in the mouth.
Matthew, highlights and lowlights of the last year for you?
Well, I remember being here a year ago and we were reflecting on the election, and I said, actually the good thing that will come out of this is the fact that now we've got some stability in the country, a massive Labour majority. Regardless, we want the government to do well. My God, 366 days have been, long since. We've had the winter fuel allowance cuts and then U-turn, the benefit cuts and then U-turn, the grooming gang, not an inquiry, yes an inquiry, 2-tier, free gear. Did you know he was a son of a toolmaker, Keir?
Really?
All of it. I know, he's never mentioned it.
That's almost a rap. I mean, I think Kneecap might have some problems.
Absolutely. But I mean, the problems that we've got as a country is stuff like, they've said that they're going to build 1.5 million houses. Well, they're going to do that by taking away all of your local planning rights and making sure that nobody can say no. And as a local councillor...
We need more houses.
We do need more houses.
We need more houses for people of your generation to be able to afford them.
Well, absolutely. But also, my generation has got to realise that actually the generation before us had 2, 3, 4 jobs, worked extra shifts to save up the money.
Many people in your generation have exactly the same thing. They're doing the same thing.
And it will be a longer journey, but they will get there. If you work hard, you will get there.
It's not quite the same thing, though, is it? Because when my parents, for example, bought their home, their mortgage was maybe 4 times or 4 times what their income was, maybe not even as much as that.
Yeah.
Whereas people having it now, you're talking 9, 10 times. I mean, it's not the same thing, is it?
But the point is that is not going to change. House prices aren't going to drop drastically to the point where everybody can suddenly now afford them. You have to play with the cards that you're dealt with. We talk, other things this government have done, they said there'd be no tax rises on working people. Well, there seems to have been only tax rises on working people. You've seen the national insurance increase on employers, which means it's more expensive to employ people. You've seen all of these cuts. all of these things coming through, I genuinely thought, honestly, even though I'm a Conservative, last year, good for the country. We've got a large majority, stability. Labour can do a lot of these radical things to the country that we didn't do as the Conservatives with our 80-seat majority.
Has Keir Starmer squandered the majority?
Well, like I say, it's only a year in. House building's a good example of what I was talking about earlier, though, Peter, which is you do need to lay down foundations, no pun intended, for something that will then do well in 5 years.
That's fine.
You know, it's something that no government has really gripped the housing market for, 30, 40 years. And so you need to build more houses, and that's how you deal with supply and demand, and that's how you deal with, getting younger people be able to get onto the ladder, which is what we all want. But it takes years to build houses. You can't just do it overnight, and in 1 year, you can't be judged on that, but maybe on 5 or 10 years, we'll see that we have got the homes for people to live in.
I'm going to agree with Paul, and I actually think the most interesting cabinet member of the last year has almost been someone who I didn't think was going to be that stealthy, but has been pretty stealthy, and that's Angela Rayner.
Yeah,
I think we thought we were going to hear a lot of noise from her and not a lot of action.
Yeah.
Actually, she's done quite a few things. You may not agree with everything she's done, but getting the house building moving, that is something that is positive. And I don't think they're going to get to 1.5 million by 2029.
It's a stretch target, isn't it?
It's a very stretch target. But if they get anywhere near it, that'll be a good thing.
It will be a good thing, and it will involve howls of pain from local councillors as well. And we've got one next to me now howling in pain. Unfortunately, you are going to have to smash through some of that blockage and get the houses built.
And we haven't
bulldoze Matthew.
Well, we haven't even talked about smashing the gangs. That as well.
We will get to that in just a second. Hold that thought. We will absolutely get to smashing the gangs, and indeed the extraordinary scenes yesterday where there was an inflatable dinghy, a small boat coming across. It was punctured by French police, and by a remarkable coincidence, BBC camera crews were there a few days before Emmanuel Macron comes over on a state visit. It really is quite the coincidence. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Jackie, who's been in touch and says, "Morning, Peter. We don't have the calibre of politicians in Parliament to get us out of this catastrophe. We need people with business and life experience like Farage and Tice instead of these amateurs playing fantasy politics. Politicians are just not good enough for Parliament, and between them, they've all led the country to ruin. And as usual, the public pick up the cost and the pieces. The political system can't continue this way because it doesn't serve the people or the country well," says Jackie. "I want to see radical reform before it is too late." And Mick in Wallington says, "Labour are duplicitous and dangerous. Conservatives are backstabbing and have no plan. Marxist Lib Dems are sitting back and watching while Davy acts like a buffoon. Most of us live in hope that Reform UK will give us back our respect," says Mick in Wallington. Actually, speaking about the Lib Dems this week, which is not something I do very often, I think there were about 6 of them that voted against Palestine Action being prescribed as a terrorist group. We know that the rest of the Lib Dems actually abstained on that. Now, their argument is that there were two other groups that were being prescribed at the same time. They didn't agree with that, some of them, but they did agree with Palestine Action being prescribed. On this, we've had legal action, High Court action last night. That's been denied. Obviously, we won't talk about the court case where there are charges. We're going to be careful about that because we don't want to prejudice the trial. But on the general matter of Palestine Action being prescribed, what's your thought, Matthew?
Good. It's a convenient excuse for the Lib Dems to sit on the fence and say, oh, but the other two that were bundled up in the bill, you know, back in the 2000s when they decided to prescribe Al-Qaeda, you know, there was about 20 groups in that bill. So, I mean, that's just how it is in politics.
Diane Abbott, Jeremy Corbyn, John McDonnell voted against it. Prescribing Palestine Action?
Totally. It's been through the Commons and the Lords, you know, it's the will of the people. I saw they put out a statement saying it was authoritarian. You know, it's gone through our democratic process and it's the right thing to do, and I think the Iranian Revolutionary Guard should be next.
Agreed.
Yeah, I'm surprised it hasn't been so far, actually. I'm going to come back to Matthew and Paul in just a second, but I just want to play a couple of voice notes that have come in. We've had this interesting story today, which I'll ask Matthew and Paul about in a second, about Boris Johnson saying that that the Conservatives should just ignore Nigel Farage. Some thoughts on that from Nick. Let's hear them.
Good morning, Peter. It's Nick Moore from Loughborough. The notion that anybody should listen to what Boris Johnson has to say is purely mind-boggling. It's for the birds. There's a man who lied through his teeth to get elected in much the same way as Keir Starmer did. He presided over the biggest financial calamity in this country with his pointless and cowardly lockdowns, which has left us in the financial state we now find ourselves in. And he's also a green lunatic. If he had his way, we'd all be driving electric cars and we'd all have heat pumps. The man is not fit for office, and nobody with a serious political viewpoint should listen to a word he says. Have a good day, Peter.
Thank you, Nick. That's Nick Moore from Loughborough, one of our viewers and listeners who sent in a voice note there. Paul, what do you make of what Nick said there?
Well, it's a view, isn't it? I think he didn't mention the massive surge of immigration as well that took place on Johnson's watch. I don't know. I think, you know, the right. Well, you asked about Starmer's great achievements. One of them is splitting the right. I mean, the right is all over the place. And,
did Starmer do that?
Well, he is the Prime Minister, and the right-wing bloc in this country is split between Conservatives and Reform.
Maybe that happened even before he became Prime Minister.
Maybe there was a trend there, but it seems to be exacerbated now, and certainly the polls suggest that that's where we are. You know, one of his achievements might be to have completely vanquished Kemi Badenoch, who we don't even talk about, and she's supposed to be the next Prime Minister, you know.
Yeah, I mean, is Kemi Badenoch actually relevant at the moment? I think there is a form of, I've been pushing this over the last couple of days, I think there's what I call asymmetric opposition in this country. So you've got, it used to be symmetrical, it used to be Tories versus Labour, a little bit of Lib Dems, maybe a few other parties making their views heard, but essentially Tories versus Labour. Now we've got the real opposition, I would argue, is the backbenches of the Labour Party, Reform UK, who only have 5 MPs at the moment, let's remember. They're a big party, they're big in the polls and all the rest of it, leading the polls, not denying that for a second, but they have only 5 MPs. And you've got, to a lesser extent now, Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana. They've managed to not have a name for their party and have a split in the party with 2 people within 48 days. What would your suggestion be?
Well, sultanas, raisins, what about the sour grapes, you know?
Raising the debate of politics in this country. But on a serious note, do you think that the Conservatives are actually relevant?
Well, so, look...
16% in the polls.
Oh, I know. I mean, as a Conservative, I'm as disappointed as anybody. As you said, even, you know, I managed to win elections and the Conservative Party won't listen.
So much so that you've written a book about it.
There we go.
Forward by Bob Blackman.
Plug number 2. No, look, going to the point about Boris saying ignore Nigel, to be fair, the Conservative Party has to just come up with its own policies. It has to come up with its own mandate, its own argument and its own narrative. We can't be living as a party in this reaction world of, well, what have Reform said, what have Labour... We have to be setting our own agenda. That's the only way that you're going to start cutting through.
But how can you set your own agenda? I mean, Paul, you know about this. You know about being in opposition. You know, setting the agenda is tricky.
It is, and there's a massive debate inside the Labour Party about whether it's right to keep on naming Farage and to say he's the true leader of the opposition.
Should they ignore him?
You know, in advertising, the mantra is don't name your opponent, isn't it? Don't sort of big up the other product, because that's what people take away. And it's an interesting debate. We'll see whether it works or not. But the Labour has decided it's going to big up Nigel Farage in a hope that it will split the right and expose them as well to scrutiny. But we'll see whether that works. But my instinct is you can't ignore the guy. You know, it is a talking point in every pub and cafe in the land, and the politicians have to reflect that.
And even if you ignore the guy, he will go onto his TikTok and make a video that gets more views than all the other MPs put together. I do want to just pick up on the comment about it's splitting the right. Let's not forget, at the local elections this year, Reform got the same number of votes from Labour voters as they did the Conservative Party. Fair. So Reform is... I think they are starting to shudder off that, you know, right-wing
And it was your leader,
party,
actually. It was your leader, Kemi Badenoch, who said that they were Corbynism with a union flag. Do you agree with that analysis, Paul? Well,
there's sort of bits of left populism within the Reform programme, you know, the nationalisation of the industries and that sort of stuff. So you can sort of see there's...
well, they wouldn't cut welfare as well.
Yeah, shadows of that. And I think that, you know, their strategy is to try and leech away Labour votes too. I mean, the Zara Sultana thing, I think, is irrelevant. You know, the left have got endless of parties. You know, there's the Workers' Party of Galloway, there's the Socialist and Trade Union Coalition, there's Respect as well. You know, there's just all these different groupings out there, as you say.
Do you not think she's going to retain her seat? And someone contacted me actually overnight saying she may be looking at Birmingham Ladywood, for example.
Well, it's possible, and we saw last time Corbyn elected as an independent.
And we've seen four other independents.
So what? What's Corbyn done since, though? You know, he got elected to this blaze of publicity. He's been there for 40 years. He takes the checks and does nothing.
But there are four other MPs as well. I think it's four who are elected on a pro-Gaza ideology and pro-Gaza kind of opinions, and that's democracy. I'm not particularly happy about it, but that's democracy nonetheless. That rump does exist in
Well, it does,
politics.
and they also supported...
And it's a threat to people like Wes Streeting, for example.
They supported the not putting the VAT on the private schools, didn't they? So they're not necessarily left-wing. They are, you know, tainted by the sort of Islamist politics, and they have very different views on things. So the idea you can create a single party, like you say, get three of them in a room, you'll have four splits within half an hour. And the fact Corbyn then denied that Zara Sultana was even going to be the joint leader within about 2 hours, absolute bungled launch. I mean, she is a narcissist. She wants to be a media person. She's got more media staff than anybody else, you know, in her office. And that this is her whole approach to politics. She wants to be, you know, the AOC of the UK, but it ain't going to happen because she won't retain the seat. It's a Labour seat, and I think, you know, she's no longer in the Labour Party, thank heavens. Also, interestingly, of course, you know, McDonnell, Abbott, all the old...
Well, they've said they're not joining.
Absolutely, all the old Corbynites are staying in the Labour Party because they believe that is their
Well, even
future.
your BFF, John McDonnell, says that he's not joining. It was interesting earlier on, I was going to pick up Andrew Rossendale on this point, and then it kind of moved, the conversation kind of moved on, but he did say he had respect for Jeremy Corbyn in regard to how he had conducted himself. Sandra's been in touch with a voice note about this. Let's hear what Sandra has to say.
Hi Peter, it's Sandra from Essex. Just heard your guest, the Tory MP, say he has respect for Jeremy Corbyn. Respect for a man who hates this country and who has been photographed at terrorist funerals, who is anti-Semitic. This is why the Tories are in far more trouble than they can ever imagine. Thank you.
Sandra, thank you. I think what you might be referring to was Black September and the memorial event. It wasn't quite a funeral, it was a memorial event for Black September where they, of course, killed Jewish athletes and others in the Munich bombings at the Olympics. What Jeremy Corbyn has said previously is that he was friends from Hamas and Hezbollah. I currently believe, and have believed for a long time, that he is anti-Semitic. He may well deny that, others may well say that that's not true, but that is my strongly held personal belief. I was surprised that Andrew Rossendale said he had not support, but respect for Jeremy Corbyn. Whilst your voice message was playing there, we had some shaking heads from Matthew and from Paul. What do you make of Andrew Rossendale's comments there earlier?
Well, it's a strange thing to say. Maybe he's trying to turn him into a national treasure, you know.
I don't think so. In fairness to Andrew Rossendale, I think he was simply saying he's had a consistent position.
Well, he hasn't changed his mind since 1975. That's true. So, for example, he's a Brexiteer.
He hasn't made his mind since
and he believes in nationalisation of the economy. And these, you know, we want us to turn into a sort of Cuba. I met him for the first time, Jeremy Corbyn, Corbyn in the late 80s when he was trying to get rid of the then leader of the Labour Party, and he gave a speech at my student union. And I remember even at the time thinking, you are not all that, you know. And he was never the most talented of the Socialist campaign group. He held the bags for Tony Benn and made the tea, but it was only just happened to be his turn to stand for leader, and he somehow lucked out. But you know, can you point to a great book he's written? You know, you've written a book, I've written a book, you've written books. Has he written a book? No. Has he given a great speech that everyone remembers? No. Any acts that he's enacted? No. Anything he's done at all in 45 years? Nothing.
I have an embarrassing Jeremy Corbyn story, which was that there was this event which is part of Féile an Phobal, which is a West Belfast festival, and they often have an event called West Belfast Talks Back, and there were a sort of panel event. And one year it was a really good panel. I mean, it was a brilliant panel. You had George Galloway on there. You had a woman called Ruth Dudley Edwards, who's just an absolutely uncompromising person as well. He's a friend of mine. Really interesting. And it was a really, really good panel. And then the next year, Jeremy Corbyn was on the panel, and he's obviously been friends with and supportive of many in Sinn Féin for many, many years. And usually what I did, because I was kind of a young, thrusting, you know,
hard to believe,
annoying person. Well, I've changed since then. I would go up to the people at the end, the panelists at the end, have a bit of a chat with them and talk to them, whatever. With Corbyn, when he spoke, I just thought, you know, this guy's just the pound shop George Galloway. Absolutely. You know, he's saying the same things as George Galloway, not as well. And I'm just not going to bother going up to him because we'll never hear from him again.
Exactly. Jeremy Corbyn is one of those MPs who sort of just sat around forever, been on the backbenches forever, had his moment getting close to power.
And
I do.
Thousands of people at Glastonbury.
I do.
Well, so
you know,
he did. But so
he did cut through the election and won as an independent. You know, but if it takes 40 years to then win as an independent in you know that seat, then there you go.
What's he done since? You know, nothing. He's had a year. I'm talking about 1 year on.
He won the argument, so there we are.
I think his idea of going off and forming this hard left party, I don't think is going to work either way, because if his own supporters aren't coming with him, you know, raising the flags with him and on their marches, then it's going to fail. But also, I think politics is moving away from the old left and right. Like we were saying with Reform, yes, they started off as a more hard right Conservative party, but now they're doing, you know, what you'd say typically are left-wing things. I think politics is now moving to a common sense. What does the populace want, regardless of whether it's left, right or middle?
If that's true, then it returns to what we've always said within sort of mainstream of the Labour Party, which is that elections are fought and won in the centre ground, and I maintain that's true. I think that's where most people...
I don't think they were in 2019.
No, I mean,
there's individual elections like 2019 where it's, you know, one issue, that is it, we've got to get on with it. But I mean, look, if we say if elections are won from the middle ground, well, Reform have some hard right policies and hard left policies. Where's the middle? They're in the middle.
They're going for the triangulation, as we used to call it.
Let's see.
Some might argue it's an asymmetric opposition in this country. Lots more to discuss. We will, of course, talk about the boats in a second. We'll show you that footage of what happened when the French police were actually stabbing with a Stanley knife. A boat. Will talk to Matthew and Paul about their reaction to that ahead of what Macron is doing. Also, the one-in, one-out scheme which has been proposed. Will it work? What do you think about all of this? Let us know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000.
supposed to read it right now?
They don't integrate at all, and they simply can't. Now, that is the heart of the problem, okay? Because the many of the Asian population, particularly the Pakistani men, as we know, just see white, vulnerable working-class girls as fair game for abuse because they are completely on the other side. They don't even see them as human beings.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a little bit later on this show, we're going to be talking about the Renters Reform Bill and your right, should it be a right, to have a pet in your home. Dawn has been in touch on this and says, "Morning, Peter. I work for a local council and our tenants were allowed to have pets, as well as cats and dogs. There were snakes, ferrets and a monkey. We also investigated reports of a crocodile in a neighbour's pond. Fortunately, it turned out to be plastic," says Dawn. Thank you for that. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. Amanda says if the Conservatives are concerned about a split vote at the election, they need to get their act together, merge with Reform and become the new Conservatives, says Amanda. And Leslie says, "I'm sick to death about this insane talk of what that slime ball, Boris Johnson, coming back, plotting a return. He was absolutely useless. Bring him back would be the final nail in the coffin for the Tories. Doing incredibly stupid things like this is precisely why we have so many problems in this country." Should Boris return, Matthew?
I don't think he will. I think he's enjoying life outside of politics.
You sort of have your moment in politics, don't you?
Yeah, I don't think he will. He's had his moment, he's had his time. I don't think he's going to come back. I think there is an appetite in the country for him to come back. And also, politics has moved on. We've moved on to different issues, different topics of the day, and different leaders.
There's always someone in the Labour Party, always someone who says, "Bring back David Miliband."
Well, you know, he's a young man, why not? I mean, he's still around, isn't he?
The only politician to ever leave politics to spend less time with his family. Right, I want to talk now about the boats. There was some astonishing footage, actually, from the BBC. We can show it to you now. And this is French police wading into the water and actually using sort of Stanley knives to slash a boat and to ensure that that boat couldn't go forward in the channel, that it was punctured, essentially, and the people who were on it coming across from France, mostly men, some women as well, but mostly men, large majority of men, couldn't go across across the channel, and that is something that appears to be a relatively new strategy. We are, of course, giving the French about £500 million a year in order to do this and to stop these people coming across the channel. It's interesting because Macron, of course, is coming across this week for a state visit as well. Is this just a miraculous coincidence, Matthew?
Fantastic. We're paying the French £500 million a year to stand on the beaches and do nothing. Finally, some French officer has done what we've all wanted. Get into the water, slash the boat, tell them to get out. What I found really, really annoying, though, was the French police then did nothing. They dragged the boat out of the water and just let the illegal migrants wander off and wait for another boat to come. Well, they should have arrested the people there. This is my frustration. Brilliant. I'm very, very happy that the French are now starting to do something. I've said for a long time we should do what Trump does, suspend that money and say, you're going to do something or else you're not getting this money anymore. We pay the French £500 million whilst we're taxing us here, cutting winter fuel payments, all these sorts of things. Finally, they're starting to do something. The next step is, right, every single person who came off that boat, into the coach, off to prison.
Paul?
We've been talking about books all morning, haven't we? My first one was called "Be Your Own Spin Doctor," and I can spot.
I have that book.
I can spot a bit of spin when I see it, and I think the fact that the cameras were there for the slashing.
Wasn't it
of
called
the
"How
boat,
to Be a Spin Doctor"?
Yeah, it was two different editions.
Okay.
We could slightly change the title. The fact is, though, that this may serve as a useful model. It was a stunt, and it was all about the optics, as we say. But on the other hand, it does seem to have worked in the sense that that crossing didn't take place. My mantra, and it's boring, Peter, is that you can't do one thing. There's multiple things you have to do. That could be one of them. And when we talk about smashing the gangs, that's another thing you can do. You can stop the boats getting anywhere near the coast, upstream, you know, and on the motorway on the way to Dunkirk. So you can do that. But the French have to do a lot more. And there's also footage of them just standing around watching endlessly. It's very difficult terrain. I mean, I think it's not an easy thing. If you've been to that part of the coast, you'll know there are lots of tributaries, lots of sand dunes, lots of, exit and exit points. But they can do far more than they are, particularly with our money, as we've said. I came down the Mall this morning, and the tricolour is bedecking that particular bit of London. So yes, Macron is on the way.
No doubt there'll be some sort of deals, some sort of announcement.
And I quite like the one in, one out deal as well. That might help.
Well, let's hear actually from Matt, because we don't have enough people called Matt. This morning, Matt has sent us a voice note on this particular aspect, the one in, one out scheme, which is proposed anyway. I think we'll probably get more detail on this week when Macron is over. Let's hear from Matt.
Peter, Matt in Hove here. Just on the one in, one out scheme that we've got with the French. Now, France aren't going to be deporting anyone that we send back. So, for example, Barnaby from Somalia comes over on a boat. He lands in Dover and we send him back. And in exchange, France send us Theo from Uganda. Okay? Now, where's Barnaby? He's going to get on the next boat. And when he lands again, we'll send him back and they'll send us Trevor from Eritrea. And Barnaby gets on the boat again. That's why France agreed to it. The same people will keep coming over and getting deported, and France will one by one keep getting rid of who they don't want there. What a ridiculous scheme.
Lots of nodding from Matthew Goodwin-Freeman.
Well, from one Matt to another, we seem to be the common sense people. I mean, that is exactly the problem with a one in, one out system. It should be none in, all out, frankly. We should not be having illegal immigrants here in this country. It is the problem that we failed as a government to deal with, although I will say we are now seeing that it's not smash the gangs, it's smash the records with 20,000 coming over. So clearly we were doing something right with all these deterrents and, Rwanda and that sort of thing. And that
is the point. In that
it has got worse.
But, Paul, there isn't a deterrent at the moment,
is there?
there?
In the summer of 22, there were comparable numbers coming over in the 20,000 league when there was the Rwanda scheme in place. So, the
Rwanda scheme never actually operated.
Never started, and still crossings were down 33%.
It was there supposedly as a return.
And now we're on for a record year.
I mean, it was a colossal white elephant, a complete waste of money, and we could have spent some of that money on people slashing the boats up with Stanley knives or whatever it might be that actually works. Rwanda didn't work.
But it never actually happened. It never actually occurred.
And even without happening, numbers were lower than they are this year.
It wouldn't have worked, and that's why we've abolished it, because it was ridiculous.
We don't know.
It wouldn't have worked, and I think closing the hotels.
Well, why
for example, we've closed the hotels, or closing the hotels. I live in a town that did have hotels filled with asylum seekers. They've gone. They're not there anymore. So that's been another positive move forward. Honestly though, if there was one single simple thing any government could do to stop this, we would all have done it by now. There isn't a single simple thing.
Absolutely.
You have to do lots of different things.
Does Keir Starmer want to solve it?
Yes, of course. It's a terrible blight, and don't even just electorally, it's a disaster. Never mind the human tragedy and the breaching in our borders and all of the security issues. It's just something that this Labour government has to fix. But like I say, if they could wave a magic wand, they would.
It's not about waving a magic wand. It's about not setting yourself a target that you're miles away from. You can say as much as you want, Rwanda wouldn't have worked. It never started, so we will never know, because it kept getting held up by the courts. Germany are doing exactly the same system, so why can they and why can't we? And also, even with the Rwanda deterrent and all the talk about Rwanda and all the talk of you're going to end up in Rwanda, numbers started coming down. We actually were bringing the crisis down. Small boat crossings were down, and ever since Labour scrapped it, literally from day one, the numbers have gone up. We've hit 20,000 this year alone.
That's mostly linked to the weather, though, to be fair.
Right. So what else do we want to blame? The weather, the flat conditions, the fact that Labour took away the deterrent. Frankly, Labour are in charge. They've got this massive majority. I am more than happy to go and buy a bunch of Stanley knives for the French and say, here you go, all of you. Please crack on and, slash all of the boats.
You might actually think they could perhaps...
It's not smash the boats, slash the boats.
Maybe think they could perhaps afford them with £500 million
of
our money. Listen, if this issue doesn't get sorted, don't look back in anger. Don't, you're going to need to stop crying your heart out on this one.
Well done, well done.
Will it be solved? Definitely, maybe.
Britain's the Oasis, that's the problem.
Just got to roll with it.
We got to roll with it when it comes to these puns. Oasis returning to Cardiff. Is it of any interest or any note to you, Paul?
Well,
Were you an Oasis fan?
I am, and I'm gutted I didn't get a ticket. I sat on that phone like lots of people have failed dismally. We went to see an Oasis tribute act that night as an antidote, but we did go and see Pulp in London a few weeks ago, and I have to say they were far better.
Is that because you're one of the common people?
Yeah.
Matthew, would you go to see Oasis, and do you think it's good? I mean, £1 billion for the economy, apparently, they're back. Even if you hate their music,
no,
which I
fantastic.
don't, it's a big thing for the economy.
Yeah, Rachel from accounts needs every penny she can get. I'm fantastic for the country to have Oasis back, but I mean, I couldn't care.
It's not your thing.
There's bigger fish to fry in the country at the moment.
Well, it's £1 billion, so I think that's perhaps not.
Well, it's probably all going to go straight to France anyway.
Well,
so,
let's hope not. Thank you both very much indeed. That is Paul Richards, former Labour Special Advisor, and Matthew Goodwin-Freeman, political commentator, Conservative councillor, and author of this book, which is called A Blueprint: How We Buck the Trend and Beat the 1% Exit Poll at the 2024 general election. You cannot be shameless enough when it comes to promoting your book, and it would be editorially unsound of me not to mention that my own book, Political Animals, is out on the 16th
of September, isn't it?
16th of September, that's right. So it is editorially relevant, so take that, Ofcom. Thank you to everybody who's been in touch. Liz says, please remember this massive immigration and houses given to people is going to negate any house building for the indigenous population. And Mark in Devon says, thanks for mentioning the Tour de France, which starts today. There aren't many TV presenters that acknowledge their sports other than football. We'll be talking more about Labour and indeed about pets. Stay with us here on Talk.
We've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino?
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, believe it, Dad, just put your foot down, Dad, we're in a field. Put your foot down, this rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting his front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich, don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, oh Christ, get hell, before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. Is an Aussie that has been dive-bombed by our version of the magpie, which is much bigger, every spring.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good morning. This is Talk. Thank you so much for your company. I'm here between now and 1 o'clock, and indeed tomorrow between 10 and 1. Loads to discuss this morning. A year of care. Labour have had a very tricky 10 days or so. We'll talk to John Rentoul in a minute, the chief political commentator of The Independent. What do you think about all of that? Also, Rachel Reeves says to the Cabinet privately, these things are never private, the taxes will almost certainly go up in the autumn. We're already taxed to the highest degree since the Second World War as a proportion of what the country country makes. Can we take more pain in a cost of living crisis? And weren't Labour supposed to stop all that and get the economy back on track? Loads to discuss there. Also, should the Tories just ignore Nigel Farage? That is what Boris Johnson has said. I'll put that to John Rentoul as well. Lots to discuss in regard to the Middle East and the BBC as well. The head of music has stood down or stepped back from her duties after the Bob Vylan fiasco when that music artist called Pascal Robinson Foster managed to say death to the IDF. That was last weekend. We'll also find out whether there will be a ceasefire in Gaza. That's something that Israel and Hamas terrorists have been talking about through proxies in Qatar. We'll talk about Diogo Jota as well, his funeral happening today. Very, very sad event. And renters' rights. Should you have the right to have a pet in your flat or house if you are in fact renting? We'll talk to someone about that a little bit later on. Loads to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Let me know your thoughts on all of it. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, send me a voice note. Please keep it free of expletives and keep it less than a minute, otherwise Tech Up Dave whacks me around the head, not literally. You can also send me a text message via WhatsApp, or you can give me a ring. 0344 499 1000. That's the only number you need this morning here on Talk. Well, thanks to everybody who has been in touch. Dan and Kent says, morning Peter, centrist politics is over simply because of huge migration. Next election will simply be a left versus right vote. The thing that concerns me most is the reaction of the side that loses. Have a great show. Stephen says the Union flag does not represent Wales within its design. That's a fair point. Andrew Rossendale was talking about that a little bit earlier on. Big debate in Northern Ireland about whether the cross of St Patrick should be the sort of national flag of Northern Ireland. It actually doesn't have an official national flag. I think that's still the case. Leslie says it's imperative this useless, unpatriotic, dangerous government is ousted at the next general election, never to return. Well, I think John Rentoul would probably disagree with that. He's the chief political commentator of The Independent and joins me now. John, great to have you on the programme. Haven't chatted to you in a while, actually. How's life with you?
Good morning, Peter. I very much enjoyed your attempt to get as many Oasis song titles into your previous discussion. I hope you're not going to do that with me.
Well, a friend of mine actually said maybe it's time for Trump to build a wonder wall to keep the migrants out, which I thought was rather wonderful. Yes, I actually my favourite song of Oasis is Half a World Away, which was the theme song for the Royal Family. It's a great song, much underrated song.
It is a great song.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, it is a great song. I know you're not a fan of the Beatles, John, but are you a fan of Oasis?
No, I'm not a fan of the Beatles, but I am a fan of Oasis. Although when I ran a top 10 worst Beatles songs competition, and someone said Wonderwall by Oasis, which was very funny, but completely untrue.
I like the bit in The Office, in the TV comedy series The Office, where Ricky Gervais playing David Brent says, people ask me what's my favourite Beatles album, and I always think it's, I think long and hard and say it's the best of the Beatles, which I think is a really... Anyway, let's talk about serious matters, which are Keir Starmer's first year, also autumn tax rises, and should the Tories just ignore Farage? We'll start perhaps with the tax rises in the autumn, because that affects every single one of our viewers and listeners. Do you think it is, or almost all of them anyway, is that something that you think is inevitable now, John?
Oh, clearly. I mean, we've seen what the Institute for Fiscal Studies have said about this. They're the oracle of tax and spend, and if the government sticks to its spending plans and they've gone into reverse with this defeat of the welfare savings bill, then taxes have to go up because the world economy has got worse and tax revenues have fallen below expectations. So there's no question that tax rises are on their way. I think the huge question for the budget is, will Rachel Reeves have to break one of those manifesto promises about national insurance, national insurance on working people, which means employees' national insurance, income tax and VAT, because there's an increasing...
I mean, there's not much left in terms of, she talked about the last budget as the low-hanging fruit. I mean, global factors are clearly an issue, but nonetheless, Labour's management of the economy is going to come under the spotlight here when they made a manifesto commitment not to put up those three taxes, national insurance and VAT and income tax.
But, I mean, those are what the people voted for, Peter. So
and that is about 75% of the tax take before you put other taxes in. I mean, what is your instinct? I know I'm not asking you to predict the future, John, but what is your instinct as to whether they can keep that manifesto promise?
I think they can. But I think it's touch and go because it's getting increasingly difficult to raise additional sums outside those three headings. I mean, what Rachel Reeves can do, of course, is she can continue the freeze of thresholds, income tax thresholds, which act as a stealth tax. That will bring in more money towards the end of the Parliament. Which obviously makes her life easier in terms of meeting her fiscal rules, but she has to find a lot more money from the better off, and I think issues such as a mansion tax and pension tax relief are all going to come into play.
Well, and that's going to cause misery for many, many people. It's interesting, actually, with Labour's first year, because really the last 10 days, I would argue, are perhaps some of the most significant of those days. We had Starmer almost literally 10 days ago, Wednesday last week, at NATO, saying that there were noises off for these Labour backbenchers, that the noises were very much on. Was that
very much on?
Was that a failure of, what was that a failure of? Party management? Was that a failure of winning the argument? Was it all those things? I mean, legislation, they may not publish the legislation until the last minute, but you and I both know legislation takes ages. You've got consultations, you've got policy development, you've got all sorts of aspects of this, and if you can't save £5 billion, in fact, end up with a bill that doesn't have anything about it, about the personal independence payment, and in fact has actually cost the taxpayer £100 million. I mean, that is a failure of government.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a failure of communication. It's a failure of the argument, and it's a failure of party management. All three. But I think the original failure was the failure to prepare for government. I mean, when Labour came into power, I have to say I think they were woefully negligent in failing to prepare for just for the first 100 days. I mean, they did not know what they were doing, and we are now reaping that whirlwind.
Yeah, and it's interesting, actually, when you think about what has happened since then, because, I mean, Sue Gray, the Chief of Staff to Keir Starmer, she was meant to prepare for the first 100 days. She didn't even last the 100 days. I mean, we were told by the sort of sages, people like Andrew Marr, for example, who were on Question Time at the time, saying, well, finally the grown-ups are in charge, and we're going to have, people who are stable government, got a huge majority. Is it politics just not being like that anymore, or is this a particular symptom of this Labour government, do you think, John?
No, I think to be fair to this Labour government, it has inherited the most difficult fiscal position of any recent government, and that is at the bottom of a lot of its problems. But I mean, that you could see that coming a mile off. I mean, years before the general election, you could see that the numbers did not add up. I mean, people go on about Keir Starmer blaming a 22 billion black hole. It's far more than 22 billion, because that's why Rachel Reeves had to put taxes up by 40 billion a year, in order just to try and rescue the public services and make up for some of the underfunding of the later Tory years. And now she's going to have to put it up even more. So the so-called black hole was much more than 22 billion, and we knew that.
It was more than 22 billion.
Election. Yes, of course it was. And we knew that before the election. We knew that taxes were going to have to rise, and yet nobody was prepared to tell the British public the truth. And actually, the trouble is the British public knew that taxes were going to rise and still voted for Labour, who'd promised not to raise the three main taxes.
Lots of people voted for Labour for all sorts of different reasons, John. I wonder if you will be rushing out to the polling station at the next election to vote for Zarel Sultana and Jeremy Corbyn. I'm going to predict probably not. But what do you make of their setting up this new party, as so far unnamed, only two people in it, and there's already been a split?
I think it's absolutely marvellous. I mean, I think there is a serious problem for Labour from the left, from pro-Gaza Palestinian independence, and from the Green Party in particular. What is useful for Keir Starmer, I think, is to see the launch of another so-called left force explode on the launch pad like this. I think that at least is good news for the Prime Minister.
Well, I'm sure, would he actually be having a sigh of relief at the end of a very difficult 10 days, saying, thank goodness Zara Sultana is gone and the Jeremy Corbyn problem to some degree? I mean, I know he's an independent now and all the rest of it, elected as an independent MP, is slightly further away, although I mean, I worry about this pro-Gaza, pro-Palestinian rump of politics. It's a threat to politicians I wouldn't necessarily vote for, but I think are reasonably sensible. People like Wes Streeting, for example, they're certainly the most sensible person, or one of the most sensible people in the Labour Party, in my estimation anyway. We're in a situation, John, I think, where politics is really fragmented. I've been talking the last couple of days about my idea that there is a kind of asymmetric opposition here. Usually it was, Tories versus Labour. Now we've got a small party. I know they're riding high in the polls. It did very well in the council elections, but nonetheless, they still factually, for the moment anyway, have 5 MPs in Parliament. Reform UK. You've got this leftist grouping. You've with a very well, maybe not powerful, but certainly influential figure in Jeremy Corbyn. You've got the Tories, 16%. The opposition's coming from lots of different quarters at the moment, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. And if that quarter, the Green pro-Palestinian Gaza quarter, had got its act together in a new party under charismatic leadership, it could have been a serious threat to the Labour Party. But at the moment, I mean, the Greens are going through a leadership contest between some really rather unconvincing candidates. Zara Sultana has, as I say, blown up her party launch on the launch pad, and the independent, the sort of pro-Palestinian independents in Parliament are still just an informal group. So they haven't coalesced behind a single charismatic leader, and I think that at least is good news for the Prime Minister.
Yes, John, and I mean that is a very, very good point. I just wonder what you make of what Boris Johnson has been saying in regard to the Tories. Should they just ignore Farage? Is that a reasonable thing to do? Because I mean, Keir Starmer, for example, says that Farage is the leader of the opposition, that Reform are basically the opposition that they're thinking of, and of course, Reform not just cutting into Conservative votes, but Labour votes as well.
Well, it's the first time for a long time that I have said this, but I think Boris Johnson is absolutely right. I think Keir Starmer's pursuing the right strategy, which is to regard Nigel Farage as the main opposition, because that is clearly the case. But I think he made a big mistake in saying so and being explicit about it, because I think that, as Boris Johnson argues, that gives Nigel Farage a huge boost in credibility. And I think the best thing to do, as Boris says, is to make your arguments. People can draw their own conclusion as to who those arguments are directed towards, but you make those arguments and you defeat Nigel Farage that way. You don't have to you don't have to big him up.
Thank you very much indeed, John. That is John Rentoul there, as Chief Political Commentator of The Independent. And John will be delighted to hear that there is an Oasis competition. And indeed, it is competition time. Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to win a pair of Oasis tickets in Manchester for the 19th of July, so just a couple of weeks away. We're also putting you up in a hotel and giving you £5,000 spending money, tax-free. Here's everything you need to know about how to enter.
On iArcade, you have to be over 18 to enter the UK, excluding Northern Ireland, for the chance to win a pair of tickets to the most electrifying rock and roll reunion of the century, a hotel stay and £5,000 spending money. Text the word WIN to 83338 by Monday the 7th of July at 11 p.m, and you'll be entered into the draw to go supersonic this summer. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission, or post your name and number to Oasis Prize Draw, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP. To arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of July.
This is a TalkSport limited promotion run on TalkSport, Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full T's and C's at talksport.com. Good luck, yeah? Sorted.
The first year of his premiership has been a menagerie of flip-flops, U-turns, embarrassment and lies. He has no courage of conviction. He, to such a degree, Ian, that he's not even got any loyalty from his own backbench. He has had this country in a precarious predicament, neglecting our defences, welcoming fighting-age legal migrants in their droves into the bosom of our country, and putting our country and its people at risk of attack. He's put his arm around the pensioners, the farmers, waspy women.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thanks so much to everybody for getting in touch, including David in Worcestershire, who says, Mr. Rossendale, Andrew Rossendale, he was on about an hour ago, he says that the Tories need policies quickly, but the broad church won't let them. As someone once said, they are a broad church without a religion. Power attracted politicians rather than the Conservatives to the party. Now they're stuck in a policy muddle, says David. Confused in the Cotswolds says, when a government says it recognises the state of Palestine, then where do they see that state geographically? Are they recognising that state on top of the state that exists there? Sounds a weird question, but how can a geographical country also be another geographical country? Confused in the Cotswolds. It's not a weird question necessarily, because Gaza, of course, the Israelis pulled out of Gaza in 2005. They elected a Hamas government in 2006. So Israel is there at the moment, of course, because of the war, but it is essentially not Israel. The West Bank, the Golan Heights, other aspects, of course, are not Israel. They're disputed territories at the moment. And the problem is, when you recognise the state of Palestine, you essentially go on the Palestinian side. That's fine if that's what a state wants to do. But nonetheless, that then is against Israel. And the problem is that the 1967 borders are what some people want them to go back to. There are settlements in some of those places, like the West Bank. I've been there, I've visited some of those settlements, for example. I've visited some of what are still called refugee camps, despite the fact there are sometimes people born there, for example. Are they refugees? It's a really, really complicated issue, and I think that the time will come when there will be, hopefully, I hope anyway, a two-state solution. I hope that the Palestinians will get a state, but I want that to be a state free of Hamas terrorism. I want that to be a democratic state. I want that to be a place where women have rights, gay people have rights. I want that to be a place where children and innocent people can grow up in peace without terrorists running their country or running their territory or whatever it is. So it's a very, very complex issue. It's one we're going to continue to debate, indeed, with Jake Wallace-Simons in a few minutes' time. He's the author of Israelophobia, a new book about anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish and anti-Israeli hatred as well. Lots to discuss with him. Thank you to Anthony in Warwickshire as well. He said Boris Johnson did a deal to get Farage to stand down in the 2019 election. Once elected, Boris totally ignored Farage and reneged on the deal. So how did ignoring Nigel Farage go then? Oh, the Tories massively lost the 2024 election. Polling now shows Reform in the lead, and the Tories fighting for third place with the Lib Dems. Says Anthony, you're right. Quite a number of polls, the Conservatives are fourth. Leslie says Paul must have forgotten Starmer supported Corbyn to be our next PM. That is right. Cliff in Berkshire says Paul Richards is wrong. The Conservative Party split itself. The rot set in with Cameron and has continued unabated ever since. What right-leaning politicians forget is that my generation is dying out and the next generation is brainwashed by our education system into being good, resentful socialists. So unless the right to do something soon, it will be too late to change our country back. Let's speak to David in Gloucestershire, who has some thoughts about Keir Starmer. David, you're very welcome to the programme today. First call, 0344 499 1000. What would you like to say, David?
Well, I thought about Keir Starmer, and I think, well, my thoughts are very simple. Is there not a legal mechanism to get him debarred from the bar, because he is now he's on record as lying all the time?
Well, he's not practising as a barrister, so would that serve any purpose? He's not practising as a barrister, so would that actually serve any purpose, David?
Well, it's not the point. I mean, it would, you know, he's a liar. He is just an absolute liar. He never tells the truth. And I think it's just an absolute disgrace that he's acting as a, you know, he calls himself a barrister. And I think
he is a barrister.
Well, I mean, a barrister should tell the truth, shouldn't they, as a lawyer?
Some do, some don't, I suppose, David. But
have to take some kind of oath or something, or you know.
But you think his am I right in thinking that you think his colleagues at the bar, other barristers, should actually bring some sort of action against him because he hasn't acted professionally, in your opinion, David?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
What do you think the biggest lies are from Keir Starmer?
Every time he opens his mouth, God, I mean, he tells us every time how well the economy's doing, how we've all got these extra jobs. We all know that the country's on the point of going bankrupt. I mean, I think another year we're going to be an IMF country. There's no other way forward, is there? You know, you can't keep spending money like they are. I mean, they've doubled the deficit, or not, you know.
Do you think taxes are going to go up in the autumn, David?
Of course they are. Of course they are. You can't carry on spending. I mean, what was it? I heard the other day, apparently, they plan to spend, was it 50 million, and they've spent 90 million or something along, or 90
There are lots of times when certainly what they want to do has been exceeded by what they feel they have to do. David, thanks for your thoughts. That's David in Gloucestershire there. Let's hear a voice note in regard to Nick's voicemail a bit earlier. Nick in Loughborough sent a voicemail. Someone has replied to that in regard to what Boris Johnson actually did.
Good morning, Talk. Hi, Peter. Great voice message just now from Nick. Please don't forget the £2 billion in emergency active travel funds. You know, what was used to close our roads for low traffic neighbourhoods, install bike lanes, when actually during COVID, the safest place to be to not contract anything was at home and in your cars. So just restrict our ability to move. And why are our high streets currently failing? Oh, we can't even park on them now. There's not even disabled parking. No, just bike lanes.
Listen, I know that all too well. I know there are so many bike lanes, especially where I live in London. Sir Sadiq, Knight of the Realm, has made sure that there is a war on the motorist in London. Ask any black cabbie, I'm sure there's some of them listening at the moment, and they will agree with me. I'd love to hear a black cabbie say, you know what, that's Sadiq Khan, great guy. Never ever heard it anytime I've been a black cab. I don't take them very often because they're expensive, but anytime I am and get chatting to a cabbie, Sadiq Khan always comes up. Brad in Cambridge says, I was a big supporter of Boris since his days as London Mayor, but I just cannot forgive him for the way he betrayed us. He is responsible for our current migration problems and the growth in the climate, says Brad. Thank you to Ian as well. He says the accusations that Corbyn is anti-Semitic are a lie. He attended many a Seder dinner. The smear was a lie to stop a truly left Prime Minister, and had he become leader of this country, the establishment would have made sure he was assassinated, says Ian. Ian, first of all, I don't think anybody was plotting the assassination of Jeremy Corbyn. Also, if you call people like Hamas and Hezbollah friends, you go on all those marches, you write forwards to books that have anti-Semitic things in them, I think you can tell the character of someone by who they hang around with. I'm sure Jeremy Corbyn would deny being anti-Semitic. I don't believe him. Shell says $500 million for a Stanley knife. What can you say? Richard in Exeter says, do you not think that the only reason the French police did anything was because the BBC were on the beach with their cameras? Said Richard in Exeter. Richard, I think there's a lot in that. Matthew in Manchester says, I'm worried about your earpiece bending the top of your ear over again. It's happening so often. I'm worried your ear is going to end up like that permanently. Don't worry about my ear. My ear is okay. We have had a few earpiece issues over the past couple of weeks. Thank you to everybody who has been very kind about that and been very patient while I've been fiddling with my ear. I've got a new one. It's not ideal, but listen, that is minor in regard to all the problems that we're dealing with, including reform and the Tories. Sally in Lincolnshire has some thoughts about this.
Great show as usual, Peter.
I think Reform ought to be careful. If they take on a lot of Tory defector MPs, they will lose a lot of votes from people who voted for them from Labour.
I think that's a very good point, Sally. Kitty's been in touch about asylum seekers.
Morning, Peter. Kitty from Kent here. Oh, Peter, you're Labour guest. I live in a town and the illegals have gone. They're not asylum seekers, they're illegal, they're criminals, have gone from the hotels. He fails to tell us where they've gone. Mr Labour, please do tell us where they've gone and how much we're all going out to work to pay for them wherever they are, because they have not been sent home.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that, Kitty. Lots of people getting in touch, including a very serious error that I made a little bit earlier on, about 15 minutes ago. I'm very happy to correct it. Stay tuned for that. William says, hi Peter, great show as always, just regarding immigration. Just stop making this country so attractive. Stop giving them all the freebies and then they'll stop coming. It's as simple as that, and it doesn't get any simpler, says a very, very irate William in Horley. He's a Reform member as well. Starmer, let me make it clear to you that you won't pay a penny more in council tax. Is there any point in manifesto promises? Says Neil. And Don says, hi Peter, Reeves and Starmer are thrashing around, not denying possible tax increases in the next budget. A glance at our national debt and rising bond rates should terrify us. The IMF is hovering. All bets will be off, says Don. And I am very, very happy to... I mixed up David Brent and Alan Partridge, two of the greatest comedy characterisations of the last 25 years. I'm a big fan of both. Usually I'm quite good at the quotes, but I didn't get it right, so apologies for that. Catherine in Cornwall says it was actually Alan Partridge who chose the Best of the Beatles as his favourite Beatles album, not David Brent. Apologies, Catherine, for that. And Edward in Suffolk points that out as well. He says, Cardi P, correction time, the Best of the Beatles joke was not from The Office, it was from Alan Partridge. I do sometimes worry that I'm turning into Alan Partridge. I've actually introduced a very good friend of mine to I'm Alan Partridge, arguably one of the best comedy series ever in this country, certainly of my lifetime, alongside The Office. My brother in particular is a huge fan, to the extent that, there are really random references, for example, about Longstanton Spice Museum, and you can actually get a t-shirt with the logo, or the imagined logo of Longstanton Spice Museum. It's just a reference in Partridge. I did once with Jeremy Kyle reference a Lady Boy, which is a drink in Alan Partridge as well, and he was quite amused by that. But it's Alan Partridge's. It's the start of each of the episodes where he's on BBC Radio Norfolk, and he says things like, he's introducing music, and he says things like, "Keep your clubs away from us young, it's Seal," stuff like that. He's just an awful, awful human being in so many ways, and very amusing as well. Right, we'll get back to the serious stuff next, because Jake Wallace-Simons is with us. We're going to talk about Zara Sultana quitting Labour to create a new pro-Palestine party with Jeremy Corbyn. The BBC's head of music standing down from her duties after the Bob Vylan fiasco last weekend. And is there hope for the people of the Palestinian territories and indeed Israel? Will a ceasefire actually happen? We'll talk to Jake about that in just a second. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, On your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Final word on partridge, I promise you, but my friend, my brother goes every so often to see his son, and it's geographically different from where he lives. And he stays in an Airbnb, and he's become really good mates with the guy who has the Airbnb, who's a massive Partridge fan as well. And every time he gives him some sort of in-joke from Partridge. So this is the last thing I'll say about Alan Partridge, I promise you. But my favourite one was when Simon, who owns the Airbnb, left my brother a completely dismantled Corby trouser press. Honestly, if you haven't seen Alan Partridge, it's on the iPlayer. It's just hilarious. Brilliant, brilliant British comedy. And made by the BBC. I'm not sure they would make it anymore, to be brutally honest. Right then, let's talk about many issues in regard to Israel, in regard to the new far-left party, and indeed the BBC with Jake Wallace-Simons. He's the author of Israelophobia, the newest version of The Oldest Hatred, and what to do about it. Jake, there's so much around this morning. Let me start with the potential of a Gaza ceasefire. There's been so much misery for the Israelis since the 7th of October. There's so many innocent Palestinians who are living an absolutely horrendous life at the moment, and we all want peace in that region. Do you think it's any closer today?
It certainly is closer. This ceasefire, 60-day ceasefire, would, we think, see the return of 10 Israeli hostages who've been kept underground largely for more than 600 days. That really is the main point for Israelis. If there's one thing that Israeli society is united behind, it's the need to get the hostages back. They want this war won't end properly until all the hostages are returned. And Hamas knows that. Hamas, of course, on its side, doesn't want to give back all the hostages because it loses its bargaining chip. I mean, that's the only thing that really gives it any power now. It's not a functioning fighting force as it was in the beginning of the war. It's not even using Kalashnikovs a lot of the time. It's using IEDs to throw into vehicles and run away and so forth. So it's a guerrilla insurgency more than a fighting force. It's on its uppers. But the hostages really is the clinching factor in all of this. If Hamas gives the hostages back, if it would have done that years ago, frankly, it could have ended the war, agreed to step down from power, its leaders go into exile, and a new dawn could have broken over Gaza. We're still looking forward to that moment, and it is closer now than it ever was.
Netanyahu is in Washington this week. I think it's Monday that he's going to have a meeting with Donald Trump. What about the role of the Americans in all of this? Because there have been, of course, fissures between their view of what should happen in Iran at various points. How united are the Americans and the Israelis at the moment, do you think?
I think it's difficult to think of a time when America and Israel has been more united. They really are speaking almost as one. I mean, sometimes there is some divergence in public, but you get the feeling that could even be strategic or tactical, in terms of disinformation or bargaining or whatever. Ultimately, Trump's praised Netanyahu to the rafters. He's pledged his support for Israel openly. They really are on the same page here. And look, Israel has never looked stronger in many ways. Iran is humiliated, Hezbollah is gone, Hamas is almost gone, the Houthis have been tamed to some extent, and of course Syria has fallen. All of these things are putting Netanyahu in a very buoyant mood indeed as it comes to the close, hopefully, of this Hamas war. And Trump is right behind him. I think, Israel might have suffered in terms of public opinion around the world, but militarily and strategically, it's never been stronger. And hopefully, with the end of the war, that will also bring normalization with other Arab countries. We could see a peace deal with Syria, perhaps, with Lebanon, certainly, even with Saudi Arabia. This could all be part of a great new chapter in Middle East peace. So let's just hope that it all takes place.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Jake, on that particular issue. Speaking of people who are definitely not united, Keir Starmer and Zara Sultana. I wonder if you think he'll be actually breathing a sigh of relief that Zara Sultana, with her far-left politics, has left. She's joined up with, apparently, with Jeremy Corbyn. That seems to have been a botched sort of formation of that party. But nonetheless, we now have at least 6 MPs who are on a pro-Gaza, pro-Palestinian issue that appears to be, certainly in Zara Sultana's case anyway, and 4 of the other independents as well, the #1 issue for them. What do you think that says, and what do you think it says about UK politics?
I think it's very worrying. I mean, we're seeing this alliance becoming formalised, what Owen Jones has called the Red-Green Alliance. And the red, of course, is the hard left, and the green is, I suppose, the Muslim community, or Muslim voters, Islamists led on the whole. And this is, I think, the first time in British politics where we've seen a political movement allying with an ethnic movement, with a faith group, or with a tribal movement. This is not how British politics is usually done. Normally, voters of different ethnic minorities vote according to their consciences, some for the Tories, some for Labour, as every other citizen does. That's our political system, and that's our culture and our norms. Whereas the departure from that into sectarianism, an alliance between a political movement and an ethnic one, is really new territory. So it's worrying in that regard. But I think that it's also extremely worrying for Keir Starmer. This will hive off a lot of supporters from Labour. He was already hemorrhaging support in the last election with the rise of Gaza independence taking votes away from Labour. And this formalised party now, which will bring the progressive wing of Labour away and ally them with Muslim voters, I think will damage Keir Starmer quite considerably, or threatens to do so. But that, of course, I suppose, is good news for all of us who don't want to see another Labour government, which is the vast majority of the country. It does seem like it's not just the right that's being split between the Tories and Reform, it's also the left now. In fact, a three-way split between, more than a three-way split between, you've got Labour, this new party, the Greens, and the Liberal Democrats. And so I suppose, ultimately, there may be some good news in this for the right, and in particular for Nigel Farage.
Very interesting assessment there. I just wonder if we could turn to the BBC, perhaps, Jake, because it's been a week now since the over a week now since the Bob Villan fiasco. Pascal Robinson Foster, not too keen on us to know his name, so let's keep repeating it, still not arrested for shouting death, death to the IDF. And of course, further footage emerging. He argued, it just wanted the dismantling of the Israeli Defence Force. Well, actually, if you look back about a month and a half previously, he explicitly, at an event at Alexandra Palace, called for the death of all IDF soldiers specifically. So let's just assume that he thought the same thing later on. He will argue against that, of course, but still no arrests in this, and the BBC head of music standing down from her duties after this. Is that enough?
Well, I suppose it's something, maybe. I mean, for the head of music to step down is I suppose, a move in the right direction. But the problem is that it does seem as if she's a human shield for the Director General, for Tim Davie. He has been the wagons have circled around him in the senior team. He's been supported and protected from any consequences. But the real deep problem here is that nobody at the BBC really had the instinct to see this death chant and to feel this is wrong, this doesn't align with our culture, let's stop it. It's the culture from the BBC that created the conditions to allow this to happen. And that really comes down from the top, from leadership. Tim Davie's been in place for years now. There's been debacle after debacle in the reporting of the Gaza war. Clearly, there's a climate in the BBC that allowed this error to take place. I noticed that the statement from Tim Davie made that classic remark that there's no place for anti-Semitism at the BBC. Now, whenever anyone makes a statement saying there's no place for anti-Semitism, what it really tells you is that there's ample place for anti-Semitism. Something about the formulation of those words.
Well, I love the Glastonbury statement as well, Jake, where they said, we've no place for anti-Semitism at Glastonbury and no place for those who would, I can't remember the exact words, but it was something along the lines of
exactly.
those who would talk about terrorism. I mean, with Kneecap, I'm just talking factually here, I don't want to prejudice a trial, but they're factually got someone on stage who's on a terror charge, and they say they don't support terrorism.
Exactly. I mean, saying there's no place for anti-Semitism always means there's place for it. It's a bit like saying, anti-Semitism and all other forms of racism. Whenever someone lets that drop, you always know where their heart really lies. They're speaking out of the corner of their mouth. And I think this, it strikes me as being the case with the BBC today at the moment as well. I mean, the BBC says that it's got new processes in place to stop this from happening.
But Jake, a week beforehand, a week before Glastonbury, they had I don't think it even was a week before Glastonbury, they revised a particular piece of policy that hadn't been revised in about 5 or 6 years in regard to hate speech. I mean, if the head of music and Tim Davie and all the producers at Glastonbury had actually read the guidance that was there for the BBC, it would never have been broadcast. And what worries me is the fact that Bob Villan, shouting that horrendous, awful, anti-Semitic, dreadful thing, was allowed to stay on air for another 40 minutes. Either it was complete incompetence, or it was someone who said, you know what, that's all right, he's only calling for the death of the IDF.
Well, exactly. I mean, it does feel to me as if what's really going on here is that the BBC is trying to put measures in place to protect it from itself. It's trying to put in processes and procedures and so forth, but the real problem is that it's not inclined to obey those procedures. So whenever it's going to fail to observe them, it will fail in one direction. The same thing with reporting of Gaza. It's supposed to be impartial. It's got guidelines to enforce that, and yet it always fails, and it always fails in the same direction, because that's where its heart really is.
Jake, thank you. That's Jake Wallace-Simons, their author of Israelophobia, the newest version of The Oldest Hatred, and what to do about it. Lots of people getting in touch with all sorts of things. Nick says, I'm 65 years old. I pay £300,000 per year in tax. Really? Wow, you must have a huge income. From what is left of my income, I pay for care for my wife who has dementia and support an adult son with cerebral palsy. I would happily carry on another 5 years on this basis, but not if my taxes increase further. Instead, I will retire and emigrate, sadly alone. This will leave the Treasury down £300,000 with an increased cost of paying for the care of my wife and son. Hooray for socialism. Anonymously yours. Leslie says, hi Peter, who would win a popularity contest, Starmer or Boris? I don't know, probably Boris, I suppose, but it's a very, very interesting point. If you stand for the country as an MP, says Paul, you should be banned from Parliament, as this is the House of British Politics. Quite a number of people getting in touch about Alan Partridge. I wasn't going to mention it again, but you have. In Car Share, Kaylee says her favourite album is Now That's What I Call Music 48. Ian Brown says another of Partridge's favourite albums was The Best of Queen. Regards, Ian Brown. Frank Etchells from Bingley in West Yorkshire said, I recently watched both I'm Alan Partridge along with The Office. What a treat for you there, Frank. One thing I hadn't noticed before is that Ricky Gervais definitely took inspiration for David Brent from Partridge. Anyway, I agree, Partridge is one of the funniest programmes ever made. Frank, I think you're right, actually, and that really was a sort of golden age. Actually, had Father Ted around that time as well. There are lots of very, very funny programmes on, and Ed says another correction, but Alan Partridge is not available on the iPlayer. It is not available on the iPlayer, says Ed. I'm sorry about that. I think I must have watched it on Amazon Prime, actually, and but, you know, hopefully after that error, I will be bouncing back. We will see what happens. Lots to discuss
Alan,
on the more...
I want you back on the telly. Jurassic Park.
That was an ambush there by Tech Up Dave, playing a little bit of Alan Partridge there. Pertinent to our discussion, of course. Back in the net. I am off for some superficially damaged Terry's Chocolate Orange, but we will be back in a second and we'll talk to Will Hobbs about the very sad funeral of Diogo Jota. That's coming up in just a minute.
office is embedded in corruption. They've been taking bribes to accept asylum seeker claims, and now, as a consequence, they are just inflicted onto poor British citizens as neighbours. So what I would say as a policy is every single illegal migrant, and again, I refuse to call them asylum seekers because they are not, every single illegal migrant that has had their refugee status granted from 2018, every single one of those needs to be reviewed.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, this morning has seen the funeral of Diogo Jota. It's a really tragic event. He lost his life, as did his brother, in a car accident, and many Liverpool stars have been going to that funeral. The funeral's now ended. It happened, of course, and Will Hobbs is with us, can bring us all the details. Will, just a dreadful day for both Liverpool fans, any fan of football, and just the country at large.
Yeah, and first and foremost, of course, the family and the parents, having lost two boys in one horrific incident. Both of them were driving actually to get on a ferry back to England, because the day after Jota was due back in for pre-season at Liverpool. Liverpool have obviously postponed pre-season so that all the players could go to the funeral near Porto. The manager Arne Slot was there, captain Virgil van Dijk, and his best friend, Jota's best friend, Andy Robertson, laying wreaths with the number 20 on the back of a red sort of floral wreath. And Liverpool say they'll make a decision in due course about whether they will retire the number 20 shirt, meaning that no one will wear it in future. They'll make that decision later. But I think something we were touching on earlier this morning, that because of the nature and the global nature of football, millions of people around the world are affected by this.
Yeah,
because they feel like they know him. Wolves fans, Porto fans, Liverpool fans, Portugal fans, all had Jota as part of their lives. Watching him every week. He won the Premier League, of course, this summer. He won FA Cups and League Cups with Liverpool. He got married 10 days before his death.
And there is that just incredibly tragic photograph of his beautiful wife and their 3 children on that day, and that was less than 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, one of whom was born last year. So it couldn't be more tragic. His brother as well, another professional footballer, 2 years younger than him. And yeah, it remains to be seen sort of how the club in English football respond to this at the start of the season. I'm assuming the atmosphere at Anfield for the first game of the season, which will be the first game of Liverpool's title defence, will be quite something. Liverpool, of course, as a club, very used to tragic events of late. Of course, there was the car that ploughed into crowds at their Premier League title parade, the trophy parade. No one died there, thankfully. And then, of course, the shadow of Hillsborough will never leave that club. So it is a city, it is a community that is used to dealing with such devastating
and they often
events.
Come together. The people of Liverpool come together really, really well. They support one another. I mean, in light of these tragic events, we've seen such incredible unity as well. People singing "You'll Never Walk Alone" is really stirring anthem as well, and remembering Diogo Jota, who will never be forgotten. I want to talk to you a little bit more generally, Will, just about this weekend of sport. There's so many different things happening as well. The Tour de France is happening, Wimbledon's happening. There are so many different aspects. Emma Raducanu's out. Tell us what people can look forward to, because really this weekend is one of the biggest weekends of sport and the start of a lot of different competitions.
Yeah, bang on. Actually, the British and Irish Lions are playing right now over on talkSPORT. They're taking on the New South Wales Waratahs. They're leading. They've scored 2 tries in the first half, and the Waratahs have scored 1, so I believe it's 14-5 at the moment. And we're in a stage where we're a couple of weeks away from the Test series, where they'll play 3 matches against the Wallabies, the Australian team. So all players still vying for selection, still jostling, trying to create a cohesive team, while at the same time trying to look better than the teammate next to you, so you'll get that place when selection comes around. So it is fascinating, the Lions. So they're playing their toughest match so far of their tour in Australia. At Wimbledon, we've got 2 Brits left after Raducanu's exit. She was sensational, it must be said, against the world number 1. She pushed her right to the very edge, Aryna Sabalenka, and got centre court, really rousing. We've got Sonny Cartel, we've got Cam Norrie, the Brits, Novak Djokovic playing today against Kecmanovic, another Serbian. We've got Yannick Sinner playing at Wimbledon, the world #1, so there's plenty to go on centre court. And then, of course, the cricket. England starting today against India, 200 runs behind. It was a phenomenal day's play yesterday. England started 500 runs behind, were 84 for 5, and then Jamie Smith and Harry Brook, the two mid-order batsmen, they put on a 300-run partnership. So between them, they got 300, and all their teammates put together got 49. So there was this one massive partnership. Jamie Smith, the wicketkeeper, blazing an incredible 100. And then England, after all that, still 100 runs behind. India are batting now. They're 2 wickets down, and they're about 300 ahead. So 2 days left of that. But India are well ahead, but England in the last match put on a record run chasing 371. So this edition of the England team under Brendan McCullum and Ben Stokes, anything's possible. So it should be another cracker in the next 2 days at Edgbaston. So a fascinating weekend of sport. And of course that series is 5 matches, so we've got that to look forward to for many weeks to come.
Marvellous. Will, thank you for all of that. Well, that's Will Hobbs, who's a TalkSport presenter. Thanks for joining us in the studio. Lots to discuss and lots of sport to look ahead to. And of course we will join the TalkSport network at 1 o'clock, as we do every Saturday and Sunday, and I'll be back between 10 and 1 tomorrow, of course, as will Alex Phillips is returning tomorrow between 6 and 10. She's got an exciting tale to tell about what she is up to today. I've been slightly instrumental in that. I would imagine she will share that with you during Weekend Breakfast tomorrow. Let's get a few more of your voice notes now. Mark has been in touch from Lancashire. He wants to talk about the small boats.
Yeah, hi Peter, it's Mark in Lancashire. This thing with the French slashing these boats was a bit of performative theatre for the BBC, wasn't it, obviously? I mean, if the French police wanted to stop these boats, they could do. There's no way that you can hide these things. There's like 60, 70 people on them. So they either transport them to the beach totally inflated on the back of a low loader, in which case they're going to stand out moving through towns, or B, they take them to the beach deflated in the back of the van. Then they've got to pull them out of a van. They've got to have a compressor. They've got to have generators. They've got to inflate them at the side of the beach. They're going to be there for an hour. These things don't inflate in 5 minutes. They're a big piece of kit. They've got to be set up. They've got to put the outboard motor on them. They've got to do all this stuff. It's going to take an hour or 2 hours to get these things organised. So where are the French police then? It's just absolutely farcical. And who's paying for them?
Well, I think we are. We're giving them £500 million a year. All those points make perfect sense, Mark. Thank you. Just some breaking news. Police have launched a murder investigation after an 85-year-old man has been found dead at a property in London. Officers were called around 1 o'clock yesterday to an address in Streatham in South London. Emergency services tried to save his life, but the man was pronounced dead at the scene. The 36-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder. He's in custody at the moment, and the police, of course, are appealing for information, as they always do, but we'll bring you any developments on that. That's a murder investigation launched after an 85-year-old man found dead at a property in Streatham in London. Thank you to everyone who's been in touch. Let's actually play another voice note about Labour MPs and Rwanda. This is from Joe.
Well, I really like listening to Paul Richard talking about how the Rwanda scheme wasn't working when it clearly was, because Ireland were actually getting a bit upset that people are starting to go there and not come to our shores. And I think next they'll be telling us that actually all these illegal immigrants are a net benefit to the country. Won't be telling that to all the people and all the youngsters that can't ever get on the housing market or pay rent to live.
Thank you as well to Mark in Lincolnshire, who has sent us a message about Labour.
Hi Peter, Mark in Lincolnshire. Just a quick message for you. Great show, mate. Just respond to, is it David, was it, that sent a voicemail? I think you were chatting to him, weren't you? And he was crying on about Starmer again, like so many seem to do. Oh, he's a liar, There must be a mechanism to get him out. Rah, 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 rah. No, there isn't a mechanism. We're stuck with a guy. Deal with it. I hate the fact that we're stuck with him. He's an absolute nightmare. The whole Labour Party are an absolute bloody nightmare. However, we're stuck with them. Grow up. Stop crying about it. I mean, for goodness sakes, if we did this about everything all the time, we wouldn't get anywhere, would we? For the second time in a week, I'm without water again. Water supply. What should I do? Should I demand? Should I urge and demand an outrage? Sack him. Sack whoever's responsible. Sack him. Should I do that? No, I don't do that. I just have to deal with it and get on with it. So that's what he should do. That's what anybody that's raging about Starmer should do, instead of acting like a bloody baby. Anyway, that's all I've got to say. Cheers.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I'm sorry to hear about your water supply there. I hope you get that fixed very, very soon. Thank you to Leslie as well, who says, Peter, we already have MPs who advocate blasphemy laws, first cousin marriage, and talking about an airport in Pakistan rather than worrying about issues here. Imagine our parliament with more who support these views. Shane in Sydney's been in touch as well and says, can you sing us an Oasis song? Just kidding, mate, it's another top show. Give Jack, your cat, a hug from me. Thanks, Shane in Sydney. Thank you, Shane. Shane contacts us. Sometimes he watches in the evenings in Sydney, and wherever you are around the world, or whether you're here in the UK, everyone is welcome here at Talk, and your opinions, of course, are the lifeblood of the station. We're going to talk to Stephen Wolfe in a second about migration, but I want to hear from you as well in the next hour. I'm here right the way through to 1 o'clock, and you can make your voice heard. Give me a ring, 0344 499 1000.
We've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino?
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its two front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, Christ, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How'd you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. Is an Aussie that has been dive-bombed by our version of the Magpie, which is much bigger.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon and welcome to Talk. This is Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. Loads to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. We'll speak to Stephen Wolfe in just a second about the problems the Home Office is having, because it doesn't know how many foreign workers are staying in Britain due to work illegally after their visas expire. There's also going to be a national blitz, we're told, on illegal workers. This is asylum seekers often taking jobs below the radar, outside of the law. Places like Uber Eats and Deliveroo, those kind of delivery services, often what happens is that they say someone's going to deliver it. In fact, it's someone else, and it's someone who is undocumented and here illegally. We'll talk about that and whether this nationwide blitz is actually going to happen with Uber Eats, Deliveroo and Just Eat apparently working with the government on this. It'll be very interesting to see what happens. This hour we're also going to talk about renting. and the fact that if you're a renter, often you don't have the right to have an animal, and there's been a bit of a dilution of the Renters' Rights Bill. They've reneged, according to one advocate of cats. You'll be unsurprised that they've managed to find a place in my programme. They've completely reneged, Jen says, on the provision of landlords to request pet damage insurance with a condition of letting with pets. We'll talk about that. Do you think people should be allowed to have a pet? Maybe you're a landlord and you think, actually, this is a nightmare waiting to happen. We'll also talk about Oasis and a number of other kind of showbiz media matters, not least the BBC, and the fact that Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary, has failed to say she has confidence in the BBC Director General after that horrendous chant by one of the singers from Bob Vylan, the group last week, who talked about death to the IDF, the Israeli soldiers. Lots to discuss. I want to discuss it with you between now and 1 o'clock. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute please. You can send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring on the main number 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 1, and indeed tomorrow between 10 and 1, so stay with us here on Talk. Well, thank you so much for your company, and Stephen Wolfe is with me now. He's Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Policy. Hello Stephen, how are you doing?
Good afternoon, Peter. I'm very well, despite the rain, which we kind of hope will slow down some of the people coming across on the channel.
Oh, and the hot weather as well, which I know is a factor in all of that. The Home Office saying that it is announcing a nationwide blitz on asylum seekers taking jobs. This is companies like Uber Eats, Delivery, Just Eat. They've promised to increase the use of facial verification for riders. This, I think, is a big victory for The Sun newspaper, which has had a huge campaign about this. And often what happens, and it's happened to me actually, where you use one of these delivery services, which I've done on a few occasions, and you get the food delivered to you, but it has a picture of the person who's delivering it, but actually that person, the person who brings you the food, isn't the same person. And of course there's a lot of jiggery-pokery there, illegality, essentially subcontracting to people who have no right to be in the country.
Well, this is not surprising, and it's one of the most disgraceful aspects about the growth in crime connected to illegal migration and directly to those coming across on the channel boats, but also those on the backs of lorries, those arriving on planes. They've not gone away, Peter. And what people like ourselves, and have appeared on your show many times, and you've commented on, is that if a government is not securing its borders, we don't know who's coming across. So certainly a small number of them will be connected to higher lens of terrorism. We've seen the results of that. There will be a larger number that are connected to criminality because they see the opportunities of staying here in this country. They can live rent-free in a hotel. They get a small stipend, but they still have to pay the debts back to the people smugglers who helped them get across. So then they'll look at ways of getting into the black market. And that is unacceptable for any government to allow that to happen. Now, I'm pleased that we've had Chris Phelps, the Sun newspaper, and others beginning to challenge this, of forcing the companies in to look at their options. But it won't just be Deliveroo. It will be building sites. It will be cleaning companies. It will be vast numbers of companies across the country, because statistically, we have got figures that look around 1 million people who are illegal migrants living in this country, and a vast number of those will be working illegally.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I should say the Home Office has announced what it's called a nationwide blitz. It says it was going to, there aren't very many specifics, but it's saying it's going to begin a major operation to disrupt this type of criminality based around enforcement teams focusing on the gig economy, particularly delivery drivers. Strategic intelligence-driven activity will bring together officers across the UK and place an increased focus on migrants suspected of working illegally whilst in taxpayer-funded accommodation or receiving financial support. Do you believe the Home Office? Do you think they have the capacity, the will and the wherewithal really to get a grip on this?
Oh, these are fine words, aren't they, Peter? They really are fine words, but they're desperately disappointing. It's almost a sense of desperation coming out of the Home Office, because we hear these words all the time. We will stop the boats. We will crush the gangs. We will work with our French partners to ensure that people smugglers don't get them across. But we've just had another 21,000 this year. And now we will have a strategic tactical force that will target this illegality. again and again and again, governments come out with the fine words, and again and again and again, it fails. And even if they did, what is the consequence of this for many of these people who are caught? We know that you've either got law enforcement, which is stretched, you then go to a court system, which is incredibly stretched, and cases are dragged back. We know that many of them, even if they're convicted and given a chance to be deported, will then have opportunities to remain because of the immigration's appeal systems, whether it's chicken McNuggets to the shape of my beard not being accepted. We know of all these recent cases. So whatever they do, they still would be thwarted by a government that's incapable of deporting these people or imprisoning them. The sole solution to all of this is to prevent people coming here and then having a strict deportation system that actually works. Until they have both of those in place, fine words will result in continued failure.
What do you think it says about immigration in this country that the Home Office fails to collect basic information on foreign workers, including whether they carry on working illegally in the UK at the end of their visas? This kind of stamping out system that so many other countries do, many other European countries, many other countries around the world do this, where when you leave, when you say, right, you've got a visa to work in the country for, say, a year, this is to do with legal migration rather than illegal migration, but we're losing track of so many people. They're just disappearing into the system. And I suppose the point is, if the Home Office doesn't know how many foreign workers stay in Britain to work illegally after their visas expire, how are they going to get a grip with a nationwide blitz on asylum seekers taking jobs illegally?
Well, this is where we believe there will be a failure. We live in a world of AI. We live in a world where we are the most monitored country in the world by the amount of cameras and CCTV imaging. We know that we can be monitored on our phones all the time, and we are told regularly that your car is spotted and therefore can be fined if you enter in certain parts of London. And yet we have a government and a Home Office that says that they can't track people who have visas or are coming in and out of this country. Now, I do believe there's probably two reasons for this. One is ineptitude within the civil service, because they do not feel that it is an important issue to collect data. And if it does so, it gives those people like myself and others to be able to challenge them on the policies. But there is a second one, and I think this is a little bit more nefarious. I think they're actually dragging us down to a world where they want us to have ID cards as the sole solution to this. So remove our civil liberties in order to be able to prevent an offence that they could easily do themselves using current systems.
Yes, and certainly there is a lot for the Home Office to try to get its claws into. I just wonder what it says, that you need the Sun, you need journalists like us, you need people like you at the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. You need people to actually raise these issues rather than the government saying this is clearly a problem, we've identifying it, we're dealing with it. And we look back on a year of Keir Starmer and we see that some of the big policy changes that he has implemented have been other people saying to him, you know, Esther Ranson on assisted dying, for example, you know, the drama Adolescence meant that he suddenly started talking about young people. It's almost as if on asylum, on immigration as well, he's being led by other people. He's being put under pressure to act and then acts. And maybe politics is just like that. Politicians do that. They are influenced by other people, their campaigns and so on. But in regard to this specific issue where you have great knowledge, Stephen, I just wonder if you feel the government has ever been in any way proactive, with the exception, of course, on day one of cancelling the Rwanda plan.
Yeah, I don't think this government has been proactive at all on the issue of immigration. I think they're just trying to tinker around the edges and do PR campaigns. But when you look at the numbers that have come over, it's just around 41,000 people that have arrived under Keir Starmer's leadership. It was 48,000 under Rishi Sunak and 63,000 under Boris Johnson. So he's increasing really rapidly in the numbers coming over. And that shows that they don't really care. It's not a matter for them that they see as important. However, I think that they're going to have to really challenge this, because if they want to stay in power, if they want to win the next general election, they're now going to be squeezed on two sides. Reform is going to squeeze them on this particular issue, and the new party with Jeremy Corbyn is going to squeeze him on other issues that they find as important, whether it's the foreign policy, whether it's looking after pensioners, whether it's looking after the disabled. So sooner or later, this particular party in power is going to have to make a choice of whether they are actually going to do something. The problem with it is we had a party in power under Rishi Sunak. We had a party in power under Boris Johnson, and none of them took it seriously either. So does this amount to institutional laziness and ignorance on this particular issue from both government and those advising them?
A year on, what sort of mark out of 10 would you give Yvette Cooper in regard to dealing with asylum and immigration, Stephen?
I'm afraid it's going to be a 0. I mean, look, at the end of the day, you've got to ask yourself, as a Home Secretary, are you making our borders any secure? The answer to that is a clear failure, because the numbers are rising and we're up 50% on last year. Are you implementing policies that can lead to deportations? The answer to that is no. Are you increasing the numbers of people who have been granted right to remain in this country? Absolutely. And why are you doing that? So you can push the costs of the Home Office onto council tax. Are you increasing the opportunities for big business to make money, like Serco or Mere Homes, by renting out accommodation in areas across the country that will allow asylum seekers to take up normal accommodation, but actually force out and pressurise people who are already working in that area?
And actually, within that, we talked about this a little bit earlier in the week, there are councils who are offering 6 months rent up front. If you're a landlord and you're someone who says, right, I don't really care who's in the home, I just want someone who's going to be a reliable person who'll pay the rent on time. Well, if the council is paying the rent, the landlords are going to take that. It's going to squeeze out people. It's going to drive up the price of rent and the supply as well. It's not fair to people who are in this country already and have contributed to this country, Stephen.
No, this is going to be one of the next scandals. And we've had enough scandals from governments over the past few years, but this is an enormous scandal. And a scandal in which the taxpayer is funding large corporations to house immigrants who are coming into this country illegally and claiming asylum, and putting them in accommodation that puts out citizens who live in this country who are paying those taxes and forcing up the rents if they can find a house or a flat for themselves. I think this is abysmal. No country in the world would sensibly see this as a reasonable policy. No country in the world would see this as the way that you treat your citizens, and no country in the world would accept this. But somehow Britain seems to find in a position where this government thinks it's perfectly acceptable to squeeze out its own citizens and make them pay for those people who are squeezing them out.
Stephen, thank you very much for your thoughts on that. That's Stephen Wilther, who's the Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, joining us there this afternoon. Some breaking news: the US and Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the aid agency, has said 2 American staff have been wounded on Saturday in an attack on one of its aid centres in southern Gaza. It said this morning 2 American aid workers were injured in a targeted terrorist attack during food distribution activities in Khan Yunis, that's in the south of Gaza. The organisation said, adding that reports indicated it was carried out by 2 assailants who threw 2 grenades at the Americans. So aid workers under attack there and wounded today in that attack on one of the aid centres of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. We know that Hamas, in its demands in regard to a ceasefire in Gaza, wants the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation to stop working in Gaza and distributing aid. Has given millions of meals to people, to innocent Palestinians who are dealing with horrendous conditions there. We know that Hamas has looted and taken a lot of the aid from UNRWA, the UN agency it wants to continue. We know that Hamas has taken a lot of that aid and has sold it on the black market to essentially people who don't have any food. It is horrendous, and they're saying that they want the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation to withdraw as part of the ceasefire deal. So that is the breaking news, that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the US and Israeli-backed aid agency, saying that 2 American staff were wounded on Saturday, today I should say, in an attack on one of its aid centres in southern Gaza. If there are any developments on that between now and 1 o'clock, we will of course bring them to you. Your calls and messages next. We're also going to talk before the end of the programme about renters and whether you think it is okay and should actually be allowed to have cats and dogs in your flats or in your rented homes. That's something that the Renters Reform Bill is going through at the moment. One of the advocates for cats and rescue cats, Jen Berezi, is going to join us a little bit later on. We'll also talk about Glastonbury, the controversy there in the BBC, and of course Oasis. Lots to discuss, and get your call in as well. Use the break, pick up the phone, give me a call about whatever's on the tip of your tongue today, whatever we're talking about. 0344 499 1000.
the Home Office is embedded in corruption. They've been taking bribes to accept asylum seeker claims, and now, as a consequence, they are just inflicted onto poor British citizens as neighbours. So what I would say is a policy is every single illegal migrant, and again, I refuse to call them asylum seekers because they are not, every single illegal migrant that has had their refugee status granted from 2018, every single one of those needs to be reviewed.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who has been in touch, including Trevor in Harrow, who says Stephen Wolfe has to get back into politics and join a party. He's far too good to be on the sidelines. He would be a perfect Home Secretary, says Trevor in Harrow. Leslie says, I dread the hot weather, not because it's uncomfortable, especially sleeping. No, because I know we have hundreds more illegals coming across our border. Thank you to Carl, who says everybody moans about how we're stuck with Labour. People sometimes talk about the King, etc. It's quite simple. If you are unhappy with your local MP, start a recall petition. A few by-elections will influence policy and send the message. It will also show the new cohort that they have to reflect their voters, not just prop up a useless leader. What's really interesting, Carl, those recall petitions, I think they need something like 10% of the constituency of registered voters in the constituency to sign them. So the bar is pretty high, but we have had those previously, and we have had by-elections as a result of all of that. Paul G in Dunoon says, Peter Starmer, in the words of the Beatles, he's a real nowhere man, sitting in his nowhere land, making all his nowhere plans for nobody. He doesn't have a point of view, knows not where he's going to. He's nothing like you and me, says Paul G in Dunoon, tying up quite a number of the threads of what we're talking about today. Thank you as well to Colin, who's been in touch about converting homes for migrants. Colin has this voice note.
You probably will not read this out, but I live on a council estate in Bartley Green, Birmingham, called Loy Avenue. When someone passes away from one of the properties, a 2-bedroom could be a 3-bedroom, the council will go in and will convert the place into just 3 to 4 bedrooms, complete brand new kitchens, brand new everything goes in. They work on there for about 2 weeks. During the night, they move people in. You can probably guess who they move in. I've known people to be waiting at the council to get a property for years, but these people are moved in overnight, sometimes 3 and 4 in the morning. Thank you, Peter. Bye.
Well, thank you, Colin, and at the Home of Free Speech and the Home of Common Sense, I'm very happy to play your message out, because that's exactly what is happening. And we know that many councils are essentially saying to landlords, we'll guarantee income for you. In fact, I know someone who runs a small hotel, a beautiful small hotel that I've stayed at actually, who told me that he was told that he would have guaranteed for 7 years asylum seekers living in all of his rooms. He could have taken them in. He could have had that guaranteed income for those 7 years under a Home Office contract. He said no to that, which I think was a very principled position. I know that there are landlords who will say, well, we don't really care who's there. If it's someone there and guaranteed rent, fair enough. And yes, as Colin correctly says, what is happening is that councils are saying, we will do up the place, we will make it more habitable, we will make it a nicer place to live. And that is happening for asylum seekers. That's part of the plan to get them out of hotels. Now, I don't know about you, but no one's ever paid for me to have a nice new kitchen. No one's ever paid for me to do that. I work hard, I pay taxes. I know so many of our viewers and listeners do that as well. And it comes back yet again to my question, what is the reward for following the rules? In our society, if you work hard, if you get up in the morning, if you go to work, if you pay taxes, if you don't break the law, if you do the right thing for your kids, if you do the right thing for your family, where is the reward? What happens is the government is going to say to you in autumn, we're going to take more of your money away in taxes, even though you're paying the highest taxation since the Second World War as a proportion of what the country makes. Let's hear from Wayne.
Hello there, Wayne from Essex. So just down the road from me, there's a massive island called OC Island. It's currently on the market for 25 million quid. Now, I mean, I'm not in politics and I'm probably not a very clever man, but wouldn't it make sense just to buy the island, put some tents on it, feed them rice and chicken, and see what happens? I mean, it would save a lot of money and makes a lot more sense as a deterrent. Anyway, it will never happen because there's not enough money to be made out of it. through all the cronies and stuff, taking the backhanders and friends of businesses owning this company and that company that are dealing with the hotel situation. So yeah, simple idea. It works for the UN, but it ain't gonna happen, is it? Let's be true.
Wayne, I think that's actually a reasonable idea. I don't think you're being unintelligent at all, actually. I think a lot of people will say that's a good idea. Certainly, I am not saying that people should not be treated humanely. I'm not saying people shouldn't be fed, watered, given medical attention, but that has to be the absolute minimum. I mean, a lot of people say these people should be turned back immediately they are on our shores, and I think there's a lot of merit in that as well. They shouldn't be coming in the first place. They are here illegally. They have committed an illegal act by coming to this country in the first place, and we should not be putting them up in hotels. We certainly should not be giving people new kitchens and taking property off the market. The fairness aspect is something that I'm really, really worried about, and I'm totally understanding as to how people are so angry about this. It is not a racist thing. It is not something that's politically incorrect. It is perfectly reasonable to say it because it's happening. It is factual. Let's speak to Georgina in London. She's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Georgina, I think migration is what you want to talk about.
I certainly do. Good afternoon, my
Good afternoon. Hello.
I just want to say I don't think it's unfair or unreasonable to want to look after your own people before you start looking after people from other countries. I don't think that's unreasonable at all. I mean, we've had a tsunami of migrants coming over the channel for years, Peter, and nothing's been done. You know, we're giving France £500 million to stop the illegal migrants from getting into the boats. And it just so happens that when one boat does get slashed with a Stanley knife, that's the most expensive Stanley knife in the world, by the way, £500 million, that a camera was there to film it. Now, I don't know about you, but that seems really convenient that there was a camera and someone to document it for me.
Yeah.
And the fact that we've got Macron coming over here next week, I think it is.
Yeah, that's right.
I think
Tuesday.
that is also very convenient. Now, what I think should happen, and if I had a hand in it, it would, I think for every boat that lands on our shores, we should fine France £10 million. 10 million for every boat that lands on our shores because they have defaulted.
How are you going to enforce that, though? Would you take the money away from the money we give them already? And where's the incentive for them to help us if we're just fining them?
Absolutely. Well, yes, the money would be taken from monies that have been given. I would fine them. Listen, if we park illegally, we have a fine stuck on the front of our car, or now with the technology we have, the fine will come straight to your door. The fine would go straight to the French government, and they have to pay because, you know, we are the laughing stock now throughout the world. We are becoming one of those, what do they call, the Premier Inn for the whole of the waifs and strays of third world countries, and we can't do it. I don't know about the rest of Britain, Peter, but personally, I don't want migrants coming over here. I don't want to have to give them bed and board and expenses. We want them stopping, full stop. You know, what is this charity week? I can't believe that we're still spending out and that this government that we have cannot do something to stop it. It's not a case of they can't, it's a case of they won't. And there's two very different things. We now need to take a hand on this real problem. It's an emergency now, Peter. It's not just a problem, and we need to get it sorted because this cannot go on. It's us that are spending the money, the British taxpayer, not the government. And it's with all socialists. They're very good at spending other people's money.
Yeah, it's a very, very fair point, and thank you for it, Georgina. That's Georgina in London there. Give us a call on 0344 499 1000. Thanks to Graham and Bushy as well. He says, I can't believe everyone is being so beastly about Starmer in his first year. He's grown the economy enormously. He's solved the illegal migrants crisis. I have more money in my pockets from all his tax savings, and he's surrounded himself with cabinet colleagues that are the brightest and best in the business, such as Lammy Cooper and Bridget Phillipson. Graham, I sense there might be a note of sarcasm in there, and you know the difference between the person who makes the sarcastic remark and the person who doesn't get it, Graham, don't you? The sarcasm. Stay with us because we're going to talk about renting next and whether you should have the right to be able to have an animal if you're renting. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who's been in touch on Twitter, including Murpho, who says, can you please tell John that, John Rental, who we were talking to a little bit earlier, that Rishi Sunak was predicting higher tax from Labour before the election, but nobody was listening to him then. Perry says, it's my first anniversary as Prime Minister. It's been an utter shambles, U-turn after U-turn. Backbenchers will not toe the line. Sue Gray, Lord Ali, freebies, two-tier justice, firebombing, prison for tweeters, chancellors and flood of tears. Macron is to visit the UK. I'll give him a ring and ask him to get some of his police to put a Stanley knife into a dinghy full of illegals, one with some women and children if he can find one. Once that is the case, I will give the BBC the heads up to get a full film crew over there to show that I am really snashing the snuggling gams, says Perry. Of course, Keir Starmer managed to mangle his words on that at one stage, and I think Perry is perhaps referencing that. Raphael says, honestly, Paul Richards is blaming the increase in dinghy crossings on the nice weather. It wasn't sunny, calm seas and lovely in January, February and March, was it? Totally misses the point that there should be zero crossings, and it was enforced and turned back. They should have no benefits. Thank you also to Ollie. He says, clearly judging by his sporadic delivery this morning, Peter Cardwell needs to urgently ease back on the Diet Coke. Well, the irony, Ollie, is that the vending machine is not working this morning. There's a problem with the vending machine, and neither Tech Up Dave nor I have had any Diet Coke. So if I am delivering things in a sporadic way, maybe I should have some Diet Coke because I haven't had any this morning. Brad says this policy of placing migrants in private rentals is going to be the biggest scandal for many years once the consequences become clear. My son is in privately rented accommodation and he has been desperate to get a council home. This policy will make it impossible to find an alternative should he lose his current tenancy. And Brad, you're absolutely right. And people like your son are exactly at the heart of all of this. Where is the fairness in all of this? Neil says, Cardi P, there are thousands of people living in terrible conditions in council accommodation. Surely they deserve money to make their homes more habitable. Again, a perfectly reasonable point. Sharon says, how can this government have any credibility about smashing gangs when they are planning for more and more migrants and asylum seekers over the next 10 years, offering landlords 10-year plus deals for housing them? This shows they do not want to stop this crisis. They want to keep bringing them in. Sharon, another excellent point from Sharon there, and thank you for it. And the point is that if you're saying, oh, we're going to get them out of hotels, well, the fact is these people, unless you process them properly, which the Home Office has failed to do spectacularly, well, then they're going to need somewhere to live. So that's why they're putting them in this private rented accommodation, these homes that the council are paying for, at the expense of many, many people who want and indeed need those homes, who were born in this country, who contribute, people like Brad's son, who no doubt pay their taxes and do the right thing. Bringing me back to my central point, the question I ask almost once a show these days: what is the benefit of playing by the rules? What is the reward for doing the right thing? Right then, if you live in rented accommodation, you may well want to have an animal there. I think that's a pretty reasonable thing, to have a dog or a cat. If there's room, of course, for a dog, some larger dogs, of course, need a lot more space than others. And the government has just published their amendments now to the Renters' Rights Bill. This is something that will affect everybody who rents accommodation in this country, an increasing number of people, millions of people. Jen Berezi is with us. She is from Advocates East Midlands. Jen, thank you for your thought of joining us today. And I see Toffee the cat is with you. It's about time we had a cat back on the screen. Jen, what's happening here? What's the government saying? And tell me why you're objecting to it.
Sure. Let me pop Toffee down because he's getting a bit restless, but he wanted to say hi.
Well, I'm glad he did. He's a beautiful cat.
So the previous government had included the clause that we campaigned for with our Heads for Tails campaign, which was to allow landlords to request pet damage insurance for anyone that wanted to rent one of their properties with a pet. It was pretty much a one-size-fits-all solution. Tenants liked it, landlords liked it. We had cross-party support right through the then Conservative and various MPs that are now serving in the Labour government backed us as well, and the Liberal Democrats. We had organisations such as the National Residential Landlords Association and Property Mark backing us. We had animal welfare organisations like the National Office for Animal Health backing us, and the amendment was included. We thought we'd have to campaign again when the Labour government came in last year, but as you know, they pretty much did a cut and paste on renters reform and introduced renters' rights with a few twiddly bits, and that's been going through the parliamentary process on its way to becoming legislation. What they did about a week ago is suddenly ditch the amendment that would allow a landlord to request pet damage insurance. Currently, landlords are capped at being asked for 5 weeks' worth of rent as a deposit, and they can't ask for any additional deposit above that. They can't force any additional costs on a tenant, which pet damage insurance would be. And it's completely taken the private rental sector by surprise. No one saw this amendment coming because it makes no sense.
Let me just put to you a couple of questions, Jen. Sure. I'm on your side. As you know, I'm a massive rescue person. I know that it's really important to adopt rather than shop. I would like everybody, or as many people as possible, that it's practical for them and that they can responsibly look after an animal, to look after an adopted animal from a shelter. And I want to say that that is my position. But many people will know that's my position. A lot of people, especially landlords, will say, this is a risk to us. This is a risk that an animal will go in, will cause damage, that perhaps we won't be able to get our money back, that they'll damage the property, that they don't want, for example, large dogs in properties that are perhaps unsuitable for a large dog. What would you say to them, Jen?
I would say that's exactly why we wanted them to have the right to request pet damage insurance, either a policy that the tenant would take out or a policy that the landlord would take out and ask the tenant to pay the premium for. We know there are risks. Of course there are risks. There are risks when you let to anyone, adults, children, people with pets, whatever. Of course there's risks, and you need to mitigate that. And that's exactly what pet damage insurance does. Now, people were saying there weren't products on the market, but there are, and there are products in development since they introduced the idea of pet damage insurance from our campaign onto the white paper and then onto the bill itself. I'm actually talking straight away after our conversation now with a company that underwrite a specific landlord policy for pet damage insurance. So the products are out there. The other argument they have is cost. Well, again, that's crazy. Premiums sort of start from around the £15-20 per month upwards. Landlords at the moment are, if they're allowing pets, tend to charge pet rent, which can be £25 per pet per month. That's £300
which would cover that, certainly. Anna's been in touch from Essex. Let me just put this point to you, Jen. I used to rent out a small house. I let it to a young couple who begged me to allow their small dog to come too, otherwise they would have to live with this family member. I agreed, as they seemed like a nice couple. When they left before the contract was up, I had a stinking dustbin half full of dog poo to dispose of, which they left me. Thank goodness I sold up last year. Good luck to everyone still renting out property. Now, of course, those people are very, very inconsiderate. There's no doubt about that. But there will be a number of landlords watching and listening to this programme who are really quite nervous about any animals coming into their property. But Jen, I think you make a fair point in terms of saying, well, you know, people can cause huge amounts of damage to properties as well, and there's always a risk when you're renting out property, isn't there?
There is, of course there is. And I would say to Anne, I'm really sorry. You do hear the occasional horror story. What you don't hear is all the positive stories. It's like with anything. The irresponsible minority get the majority a bad name. And I think that can be answered with proper tenant pet referencing before an animal is taken on board, and that's something we advocates do for landlords here in the East Midlands and for tenants, and also proper inventories and inspections. If you're not going to check on your property on a regular basis, particularly if an animal's just been introduced, then you kind of open yourself up to more of a risk.
I wonder, Jen, as well, in terms of the advocacy that you do, not just for cats, but for rescue animals in general. I mean, there are loads of animals in shelters at the moment, aren't there? There are lots of people who took in animals or bought animals during COVID who have decided, actually, no, our lifestyles now don't suit them. And that, to me, is awful and horrendous. And I think that is a real dereliction of people's duties. But there are a lot of people who are in situations as well because of the cost of living crisis, but that they just can't afford vets bills, for example, which are some of the highest in Europe. Just give us a picture of how things are in your world at the moment, certainly when you're trying to advocate for cats in the way that you do.
It's very difficult at the moment because landlords have their pick of tenants. There are on average, I think the latest figure I heard was 11 applications for every single rental property. So it's very easy for a landlord to cherry pick a tenant that they see as the lowest risk possible. It's a very, very difficult situation, and rescues in this area are absolutely bursting at the seams with animals that haven't been neutered. So there are lots of litters of kittens and puppies, of animals that are being given up, yes, for the cost of living crisis, and of animals that are being given up for rental reasons. That's the second highest reason, certainly, that Battersea have animals surrendered to them.
Yeah,
it's a huge problem, and the unintended consequence, it's such a favourite expression of politicians, but the unexpected consequence here is more animals going into rescue, more rescues going under because of demand, and a stray animal crisis. And the government have the power to stop that by just reintroducing this amendment, which is common sense and is favoured by tenants and landlords alike.
Jen, thank you for speaking to us today, and all the best to you, and indeed to Toffee. That is Jen Baresi there, who is founder of Advocates there in the East Midlands, and thank you to her for bringing that forward. I wonder what the government will do. Will they listen to Jen and the many other people who agree with her? Let's hear a voice note just before the break from Rob on immigration.
Hello, Peter. Robin Starbridge here, mate. Peter, with regarding illegal immigration, I want every politician from the last 30 years held responsible for this, because we never asked for it. We never asked for illegal immigration. We've never wanted it. It's them who have wanted it. So they are responsible for the rise in crime by foreigners in this country. They're responsible, not us, them. They're responsible for the rape of young girls by illegal immigrants who come over. They're responsible for the deaths of people caused by illegal immigrants. They should be held accountable, Pete. But what do? They just take it out on the British taxpayer and take the out of us by putting them in hotels and making us pay for it, mate. It's disgusting. Absolutely disgusting.
Rob, I understand why you're angry. There's a lot of frustration in that message, and I think that frustration is felt by so many people who just feel that we are being taken for mugs in a lot of this. And I totally get where you're coming from on all of that. I think those are reasonable points. I know you're angry. I know there's frustration there. And there's a lot, I think, that the government needs to listen to you. And the problem is that people don't feel they are being listened to. We will listen to you, of course, and I'll talk with you about these things. Let me know your thoughts. You can give me a ring before 1 o'clock, or indeed tomorrow between 10 and 1. I'm actually here for Drive as well on Monday between 4 and 7. It's Jeremy's 60th birthday, so he's taking the day off. I'm doing Drive on Monday, Thursday and Friday. So you can give me a ring between now and 1 if you like on 0344 499 1000. We'll speak to Beverly Lyons in a second. She's an entertainment reporter. Lots on Oasis, of course, and the controversy in regard to Glastonbury and the BBC. And thank you to Dean, the weekend editor, who, unlike the anti-fun Phil Dave, Dean is the weekend editor at the moment, and both Dave and I have been given these delicious cans of Diet Coke, which I will be enjoying in the break just before we speak to Beverly. And I'm afraid Ollie, this is my first Diet Coke of the day. Tag Up Dave behind the screen is giving me a little cheers there. And thank you to the person who says, cheeky git commenting on your Diet Coke, just ignore them. There we are. Ollie's entitled to his opinion, but I'm also entitled to my Diet Coke. Cheers. Stay with us.
The Home Office is embedded in corruption. They've been taking bribes to accept asylum seeker claims, and now, as a consequence, they are just inflicted onto poor British citizens as neighbours. So what I would say is a policy is every single illegal migrant, and again, I refuse to call them asylum seekers because they are not, every single illegal migrant that has had their refugee status granted from 2018, every single one of those needs to be reviewed.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody, and I just want to say online, thank you to everybody who has said they enjoyed 1 year of Chaos, which was the programme we put together as a station last night. It was on at 9 o'clock, between 9 and 10, but you can see the whole thing on our YouTube channel as well. It's all of the top presenters and me giving their analysis of what happened over the last year. Mike Graham, Alex Phillips, Ian Collins, Kevin O'Sullivan, Julie is in there as well, Julie Hartley-Brewer, of course, and I'm in there giving our analysis of what happened, talking us through what we believe to be 1 year of chaos. certainly. And thanks to everybody on Twitter who's just said nice things about it, that they enjoyed it. I've had a number of people contacting me, so appreciate all of that. Also on Twitter, Angie says, the Peters, can we get all the Peters on one show? Peter Cardwell, Peter Barnes and Peter Blexley. Now that would be fun. We'd have to have nicknames for you, but there's only one Cardi P, says Angie. Do you know, it's tricky. We sometimes have, on the debate desk, we have two Matts. We had a Maxwell and a Max last week, and I got horribly confused as well. Yes, that wasn't so good. Rex has been in touch from the United States and says the only thing better than paying France to stop the boats would be if Macron came over for his visit on a dinghy. It seems the French have made a habit of having a good laugh at our Brits' expense. Enjoy the show, says Rex. And Natalia has been in touch from Tel Aviv and says, my landlord here has had bad experiences after allowing dogs in his properties. He owns the whole building. So sadly, we aren't allowed a dog here, which is both understandable and heartbreaking, since I would absolutely love a rescue. Well, it's a real shame you can't have a rescue dog, Natalia. I don't know if in Israel they have the same thing. It's a really good scheme called Borrow My Doggy, and what happens is you have people who, you know, maybe have kids, or, you know, their dogs, of course, like Labradors and Golden Retrievers, that need, you know, 2 hours exercise a day or something like that, which is often quite difficult for people to do, to fit it in, or 3 hours sometimes if it's a St Bernard or something like that. And actually they have this website where you can sign up and say, I'm going to borrow your dog. Obviously there are checks and things to make sure that you're not a nutter. They borrow the dog and you bring it for a walk. You sort of have the experience of having a dog, but not the ownership of it. And it's a really, really good idea. It's called Borrow My Doggy. And I've done it sort of informally with various friends. It was, you may know, I mentor a young man in the care system. He loved, at one stage he went through a period in his teenage years of loving a dog, loving dogs, and we borrowed my friend's dog, went for a walk with it, and it was just lovely. It was a really, really nice thing. Ernie's been in touch and says, I'm a handyman. I work for a landlord with lots of properties. You would not believe the state of some of the houses that had dogs that they can't let out when they are working. When they leave, you can't go somewhere because of the stench of ammonia soaked into the floorboards and carpets. I normally have to gut the places and completely refurbish them. That costs thousands, and they have to ask, and they have the cheek to ask for their deposit back as well. Well, let's move to another, well actually I want to hear a voice note just before we speak to Beverly Lyons, just a voice note from Kitty on private landlords. If we can play that, please.
Hi Peter, Kitty from Kent here. Just talking about private landlords. Just the world has gone mad, really. A landlord who owns a private property should be able to say who they want in their property and when they want them out. And my husband and I used to rent a house out, and our rule was no pets, no young children. And I believe that under the Conservatives this right was eroded, and under the Labour it's just going to be finished off. And so in a world where there's no personal responsibility and you're not even allowed to make rules for your own property, I mean, where does it end? There is going to be nothing on the rental market. And so it shouldn't even need to be insurance. You should just be able to raise your rental price for someone if you allow them to have a pet in, if you choose to, as a private landlord. The world's gone mad.
Kitty, thanks for that. I mean, in fairness to Jen, who was on a little bit earlier on, she was essentially saying charge people a little bit more. Say there's pet insurance, say, you know, another £25 a month or something like that in regard to covering the pet insurance and making sure that those people act responsibly. And there's no better way to incentivise people than by charging them a bit more and saying, look, it's a financial decision here, and if you don't get your animal to behave correctly, well, then there are going to be consequences for that. I have a relative who said, who pointed out that Jack, my cat, was using his claws on my quite expensive sofa, and said, you know, that's outrageous that Jack is doing that. My answer is always the same. It's his sofa too. Let's speak to Beverly Lyons, who's an entertainment reporter. Beverly, you're very welcome to the programme. Thanks for joining us today. Lots to talk about, including Oasis in Wales last night. What were the set list? Was it any shock to you? They managed to get on, the Gallagher brothers. They managed to not fall out with one another for the whole evening.
I think it was incredible, and obviously this is such a long-awaited moment. 16 years was the last time that they were together, and of course when they came on stage they were holding hands, which I think was a bit of a shock to everybody. Noel even looked a bit emotional. That was quite incredible. They started with, of course, Hello, which was a great song to begin with, and then they ran through all the classics, you know, What's the Story, Morning Glory, the Superstar, Supernova, the full thing, cigarettes and alcohol. It was very touching. They also did a tribute to Jota actually during the evening as well. This was at Cardiff Principality in front of 75,000 people. I mean, that is a heck of a crowd, and that's just one night, and they've got another night there, and then they go on to Manchester, and they come to Edinburgh as well, to Murrayfield, so we'll be looking forward to that. But I think this is the thing, you know, they've had such a colourful history, the guys, and this is a moment that many thought would never happen. So to actually see it taking place, and I know that some people were sort of live streaming it all over the place, you know, and becoming sort of TikTok heroes for getting away with showing the rest of the world what it was all about. You had a lot of celebs turning up for it as well, people like Danny Dyer there, Rob Brydon, a whole host of different people. Vernon Kay, I think, was in the audience as well. Also, they paid tribute to their mum and dad, which is very nice, I think. Peggy and Tom, they flashed up images of them as kids. So it was a very nostalgic occasion as well. There were quite a few camera phones, as I see in sight, but some people just put them down and enjoyed the moment.
Well, I always think that at a concert, you should always try to kind of enjoy the moment. You can always, you know, there'll always be a recording there somewhere. Certainly in regard to Oasis, it's not just a nostalgic thing, it's not just a present day thing, but also £1 billion for the economy, apparently. And some people saying that, you know, many of the tickets, of course, changing hands for a huge amount of money as well.
Well, that's right. I think they were meant to be around the £70 mark, but of course they were trading for much, much more. And I think there was also a sort of pre-party or about £500 plus. The guys on stage actually made a joke about that, joking that, you know, what about our £40,000 ticket? With, of course, Liam, I think, cheekily quipping that the price had just gone up following their performance. But of course, I mean, there was an outcry with that, and it is very limiting for people. You know, it's already expensive to go to any of these gigs, and you know, you're very fortunate if you manage to bag a ticket. I mean, I know one family who are travelling to the States to see them. I think it's in the States that they're going. They told me about. So,
well, I heard yesterday,
you know,
there was someone over from Japan as well. Just briefly, can I ask you, Beverly, whether you think the Director General of the BBC is safe? Do you think this controversy over the horrendous remarks at Glastonbury last weekend has died down somewhat? What's your assessment of that?
I think it's one that we have to wait and see. I think that you cannot control necessarily artists when you're doing something live or as live.
They might have known, though, that the kind of things that he said, perhaps.
Yeah, look, I think you've got to try and research people as much as possible, but then equally there's always the argument of free speech. But then again, you know, it's if you're standing up for a particular thing or your organisation represents a particular thing, then you really need to do your due diligence. Yeah. But as I say, I mean, people will always come and surprise you with some sort of...
Well, indeed, and cause all sorts of problems as well. Yeah. Beverly, thanks so much for that. That's Beverly Lyons there, who's an entertainment reporter. Let's see if I can get these two voice notes in before the end. Phil first on Keir Starmer.
Good morning, Cardi P. Great show. Phil from Hearts. Cast your mind back when we had Starmer giving his public announcement, an interview, where he said, "We get it. I get it." Well, what does he get? Can you maybe explain what he gets? Or possibly get one of his cronies on to tell us what it actually is that he gets? He gets nothing.
Well, thank you to that. Let's hear what Judith has to say.
Hi, Peter. Judith here. Sorry, I didn't get the name of the